Welcome to Stockholm, Sweden, and the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit hubs. I am Isak Petersson. I'm an educator at the Nobel Prize Museum, and I'm here to introduce the hubs to you. Just a few minutes ago, behind me here, we wrapped up the 2026 Nobel Prize Teacher Summit. 380 teachers from 33 countries gathered to listen to an impressive lineup of speakers. We had a Nobel Prize laureate on site. The topic this year was health, a global concern. And now here's your chance to join in. Using this video and the ready-to-use material that you can find on our website, you can choose interviews, lectures, or segments, the ones that interest you the most. Gather your colleagues in your home setting and engage in an interesting discussion. Good luck. We hope you will find the material inspiring and hope to see you here live next year.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you to the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit 2026. My name is Hanna, and I'm the head of the Nobel Foundation. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all, teachers from across the globe, to this meeting, to the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit and to Stockholm. This day will be a fully day dedicated to knowledge in different ways. The power of knowledge is at the core of everything that we do connected with the Nobel Prizes. We see knowledge as a foundation for human progress and human dignity. And this year, the Nobel Prize celebrates its 125th anniversary. Through 125 years, the laureates have shown us how new knowledge contributes to breakthroughs that benefit humanity. Things that we think are impossible today might be possible tomorrow, thanks to new discoveries, to new achievements, thanks to the profound work of scientists. And this, of course, inspires hope. True hope, especially among young people, especially among the students that you meet in your classrooms every day. And today's theme is health, a global concern, and we will examine health both on individual and collective levels today, and throughout the day you will meet influential scientists and experts. They will join us here on the stage, sharing important insights and perspectives. And today, we are also especially pleased to welcome Morten Meldal, the Nobel Prize Laureate in Chemistry 2022, who will be joining us up here soon. And of course, especially warm welcome to all of you who are the guests of honor today, coming from across the globe, from, I think it's 33 countries, 380 teachers joining us here today. Your presence here shows and reflects the shared commitment that educators all over the world have to knowledge and to curiosity. And it also highlights the importance of the work that you do in every classroom, every day, for our future societies and for future generations. And my hope is that this day will offer you new knowledge, that it will spark meaningful conversations and also inspire you to bring the spirit of the Nobel Prize to your students and communities back home. And I would just finish with a quote from a Nobel Prize laureate, Albert Einstein. He once said, "It's the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and in knowledge." So with that, it's my pleasure to once again welcome you all to the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit 2026. Welcome.
Thank you, Hanna. And yes, you are indeed so very welcome to this Nobel Prize Teacher Summit of 2026. My name is Karin, and me and Isak and Anna and Gustav, we have been longing for this day. We're so happy that you are here. Old friends as well as new friends, welcome. In 1895, Alfred Nobel, he signed the last version of his testament, and a year after that, he passed away. He was unmarried. childless, and immensely wealthy thanks to his many inventions, most notably dynamite. In his testament, he decreed that those who have rendered the greatest benefit to humankind should be honored in the fields of physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, literature, and peace. He also said that nationality should not be a factor. Only the achievement should be considered. Now, that is a quite remarkable modern vision from the 1890s. The belief that insight, innovation, and knowledge do not know any borders. He understood that progress for humanity is a global concern. Today, challenges are equally universal. Climate change, political polarization, poverty, and inequality are global crises that demand global solutions. So in this spirit, we are today diving into the vast ocean of global health, a complex, interconnected system that shapes our collective well-being. Complicated, yes, but at its heart also simple. The ensurement that every human being can live a healthy life with access to essential care. So today we will examine global health from several angles, turning it like a prism under the sun to explore both the immense challenges that we are facing as well as the progresses that we are making. And to do so, we have, as Hanna said, amazing guests. Gustav? Would you like to mention some of them?
Well, there are lots of researchers, experts in different fields and areas, and particularly interesting is several of these have practical experience of working in the field, so seeing firsthand both the problems and the solutions. And of course, we have Nobel Laureates. We have, as Hanna mentioned, Morten Meldal, the chemistry laureate in 2022, but of course also several representatives from, among other places, Doctors Without Borders, who received the 1999 Peace Nobel Prize. But all of these experts, well, they will share their insights with you, but we also want you to get in touch with them. It's important for have a dialogue here. And if you want to get in touch with our speakers and share your thoughts, you look no further than Anna.
Yes, exactly. And we are eager to hear your thoughts about today. If you have any questions or reflections to the speakers, I will pass them forward. And if we do not have time to address them all, I will make sure to forward them to each speaker. And you send in questions by scanning the small QR code that you have on your tables. So you're sending questions or reflections. And please make sure to write under the right speaker. But I'm curious about this day. Isak, what do we have ahead of us?
Lots of things to look forward to. And by 4:30 this afternoon, we'll close with some bubbles and jazz. By that time, you will probably feel a little bit tired, but also it's the weekend, right? So also looking forward to the weekend. Take the chance today. That's why we insist on the round tables, you know. Make some new acquaintances, mingle a bit throughout the day, and don't miss that chance. Thank you to the Nobel Prize Museum's main donors, the Erling Persson Foundation, the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, and the Katarina and Sven Hagströmer Foundation, who make this event possible. We would also like to extend our thanks to Lärarstiftelsen, whose support enables more teachers than ever to experience the summit. Without any further ado, I have the pleasure of welcoming our first guest up to stage. He's a former chief of health at UNICEF. He has recently worked 2 years at Makerere University in Uganda, and he holds the title of Professor of Global Transformation for Health at Karolinska Institutet here in Stockholm. Today he's here with us. Please give a welcome to Stefan Swartling Petersson.
Tack Isak. Vad fint. As a young medical doctor, I came to Uganda first in 1998. And the very patient head of the Ministry of Health, Professor Francis Omaswa, he said, remember, health is made at home and hospitals are for repairs. So I thought I should take you to my home. So this is me in the middle there in a slightly younger version. Now, these homes don't produce health in a vacuum, though. They're actually enabled by something called rights and human rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which actually has been adopted by 190 countries. And the only country that has not adopted it is the United States of America, right? And to remember is that all children have the right not just to survive, but also thrive. With a recent addition, actually children have the right to a healthy environment as well. And I think this is very important to remember as we think about health and well-being in a changing world. And I thought, given the opportunity to open this day, I should reflect a bit on that. Now, I returned back to my mentor, Hans Rosling's hand, the pedagogical way of saying what produces health. What are the determinants of health? And if you're interested in this as a pedagogical method, we will actually explore that in a workshop in the afternoon. And as you can see, there are about 5 things in this simplified way you need. You need nutritious food, you need clean air and water, you need learning and skills, that is yourselves, right? You need a safe environment, your house, your surroundings, and you need a bit of safe delivery and vaccination. And other health services. We'll hear from my colleagues today about science breakthroughs like antibiotics, like HIV, drugs, and things which are extremely important. But I wanted to put health in a perspective and saying that although I trained as a medical doctor, I think arguably you are more important for health than doctors are. You teachers and mothers, of course. Now, that said, how has health evolved and the absence of health? When I graduated from medical school, about 12 million children were born alive and died before their 5th birthday. And yesterday, there was a new report from UNICEF, where I also work, which actually said that it's now under 5 million. So we more than halve child mortality in my sort of working lifetime. We've never made such progress in improving child survival as quickly as we've done in this period. Isn't that amazing? It's science, it's solidarity, and it has produced this tremendous progress that we see on this graph. And it's so rapid, and it's sort of hard to keep it in perspective. So I compared it to Swedish history. The world under 5 mortality rate is now 37 per 1,000 live births. That is 3.7%, which is what Sweden had in 1945. And I think we all know someone who lived in 1945, right? And maybe was born around that, maybe your parents. And the world life expectancy is now 74 years at birth, which is where Sweden was in 1966. So the world is really developing. It's becoming a better place. Not to say that it's a perfect place. And much as we'll talk about many challenges today, we need to remember that, yes, we can. Science and solidarity can make a difference. And it has made a huge difference. Now, again, that's not all from medical doctors. Half of this fantastic improvement in child survival is from other sectors, such as yourself, such as water engineers, such as road builders, such as women's advancement, and other things that have actually produced this. So, as a medical doctor, I will not take credit for more than half of this. Okay. Now, let's go back to Gapminder and these bubbles. It's been a while since we've seen the bubbles, hasn't it? But do you remember these bubbles? Across the x-axis is money, the income. How much does a household, how much does this mother, how much does this home have to spend? Dollars per day, and this is a logarithmic scale, as you can see. Here we have health, or rather the absence of health, child mortality, 5, 10, 15% death before 5 years of age. The size of the bubbles equals the number of dead children. And the point, and here are the world's countries then laid out here. And I want to break them up to say, because it looks like Nigeria, the big blue bubble up here, is uniformly poor and has uniformly high child mortality. However, if you break up not just Nigeria, not just India, but all countries in income deciles between the poorest tenth, that makes only $1 per day, and the richest tenth, that makes $10 per day, you see the child survival or child death has a more than a threefold difference, right? And if we do this across the world's countries, for India, for everyone else, the graph looks like this. Very messy, right? So what's the point of this? Well, the point of this is actually to say, where are the debts accumulated? And as it turned out, the debts are among the poor. Poverty kills. Inequity kills. And of the 4.86 million child deaths that were reported now in the report yesterday from UNICEF and others in the UNICEF system, a full 2 million are among the poorest decile. Poverty kills here. And as you can see, if we get over here to $100 per day to Sweden, children don't die, right? It's very rare. I don't know a child that has died in Sweden. While as in Uganda, when I lived there, everyone has a child, or everyone knows, or everyone, etc. So we've sort of forgotten about mortality in children. And that's because it's the poor that die. So where are these poor people then in the world if we want to do something about it? Well, they live across the world, of course, and there are 8 billion people in the world. And lo and behold, 6 billion people live in middle-income countries, and 1 billion live in low-income countries, and 1 billion live in high-income countries. And these deaths of children, the under 5 deaths, only 9% of them are actually in low-income countries. Most poor people live in middle-income countries that are unequal, and inequity kills, poverty kills. So they're in the Indias and the Nigerias and the like, and it's the poorest that die. And even as a country as a whole might pass some statistical threshold and become a middle-income country, the poor people are still poor and they still experience the death in children. So that was lesson number 1. Inequity kills, right? Going back to these services, though, turning rights into tangible services that actually save lives, then the question is, everything is not static, right? There's a thing now called climate change that is coming and advancing. What will it do to these determinants of health? And what will it do to the ability of households and homes to make health, such as they made for me, my parents? Well, as it turns out, half the world's children are now living with extremely high climate risk, meaning they live in dark purple countries here that experience a lot of climate effects, heat, wind, drought, storms, and their systems are weak. So the health center blows away, the school has to close down because it's too hot and there's no cooling, etc. And we have countries like Mozambique here that have 1 cyclone per year now. And Madagascar, which has man-made drought and man-made famine from climate change. You see it in Madagascar, where the child mortality is no longer improving. So climate change is making things dramatically worse across the world. And much as we up here are not so affected, half of the world's 2 billion children live in countries with extremely high climate risk, which we don't talk about anymore. This report and interactive atlas is actually available also as a teaching tool if you look for it. Now, how does climate, which we don't talk about anymore, right, then compare to other risks for the future? The World Economic Forum now looked at the risk report and published it just in time for Davos. And all of these global risk experts, they said, okay, short-term geo-economic confrontation. I think that means China and the US, doesn't it? And Europe getting lost in the middle. They say misinformation and disinformation. They say social polarization, extreme weather, and then this was when was Davos? January, wasn't it? That was before World War III had started. So war was on the 5th place. But the point is, if you ask them in the long term, and long is only 10 years here, right? Which is barely when the kids have graduated from the schools where you teach. It's all climate. It's weather, it's biodiversity loss, it's the planet tipping points, misinformation, disinformation, and AI. That is stuff that you teach. We may not in politics talk about it. In politics, we may not be doing anything realistic about it. But this is the reality that you are teaching. And I'm sure your kids get to see this, and I hope we can inspire you to teach it. But the point me and my friend Shepard here, whom you'll see later today, want to make is that if you're a teacher in Africa, chances are you will never go to a refresher training or an inspiration training like this. So I am pitching the Nobel Prize Incorporated here to take this event to Africa as well, to refresher training and inspiring African teachers so that you may teach better and get the youth of the future to appreciate what's at stake and actually use their democratic rights to change societies to actually meaningfully tackle that. Now, I said we've never gone as fast in progress as we have. But what happens to in the future? Well, yesterday we published a report now that looked at the under 5 mortality rate and reported for 2024. And unfortunately, we had to say that the child mortality was unchanged between 2024 and 2023. For the first time since this graph began here, we have stagnating improvement. There's no improvement. And why is that? Well, some of the reasons might be related to those risks and the climate, but also to decreasing global solidarity. Bill Gates was recently here in Stockholm. His goalkeepers report actually tried to project the future, which the UNICEF mortality report doesn't do. It reports the past, right? And being an optimist with science, Bill Gates says, well, if we continue to fund health as we did in 2024, we'll see the green line here. But since he believes in science, he's going to make breakthroughs, and we will actually get a new malaria vaccine. We will get new and more effective antibiotics to replace the failing ones that Otto will talk about today. Bill Gates optimistically said, I've seen a halving of child mortality in my time. In the rest of my 20 years, we can do it again. We can halve child mortality again, the blue curve here. But then something happened in 2025, right? The year of big global turmoil. And in fact, we cut funding. Global solidarity waned, right? USAID disappeared, everything got underfunded, the whole global health apparatus was thrown to bits. So as a result, when national countries have to step in and suddenly take over responsibility and funding streams that they were not used to, together with a debt crisis. Many African countries now pay between 25% and 50% of their national budgets to service debts as interest payments. So the ability to take over suddenly was not there. So Bill Gates projects that, and his team, in 2025, there will be 200,000 more deaths. We'll see a year from now, when we meet here next year, whether this somber prognosis actually bears out. But nevertheless, we see stagnation. That is a fact. We might see an increase in child deaths for the first time since we started measuring again. And depending on how much or how little we cut, how global solidarity plays out, we will still see a decline. But you see the difference here in magnitude between the blue line, the possibility of what we can do with science and solidarity, and where we might end up if we take away solidarity but remain with science. But even science is under attack now, isn't it? So I wanted to leave you on an optimistic note and saying that yes, we can. Science and solidarity can deliver for global health. And we're all mutually interdependent. So it's not that we can isolate ourselves. So yes, we can, if we care. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And our next guest used to work at the Public Health Agency in Sweden. Now she's the Swedish Ambassador for Global Health. Please welcome Karin Tegmark Wisell. This one? Okay, trying now. Yep, okay, perfect. There you go. Karin, you used to, I think most Swedish teachers in this room, they recognize you from the press conferences that were held during the Corona pandemic when you were at the Swedish Agency of Public Health. Now you're the Swedish Ambassador for Global Health. What does that mean?
As an ambassador for global health, I work with public health, the interest of the general public that I used to work with on a national level, but on a global level. And I am representing the Swedish government in various fora where public health is on the agenda. And as an ambassador, I use mainly the diplomatic tools that ambassadors use, the informed dialogue, where knowledge is extremely important, but also to have relations and have something that you want to gain in exchange with the one you have the dialogue with. And from my side and my part, and from the Swedish government, we want to push that decisions are made on an evidence-based. Of course, there are always political interests, but to make sure that the government and the decision makers have the knowledge to make informed and evidence-based decisions.
Okay. And we heard Stefan here talking about the inequity kills and all that. What would you say is, so from a global health perspective, what do you think is the most imminent challenge that we're facing right now?
Well, there are many challenges, but also many opportunities. We are in times of polycrises, where we have several different crises that makes the decision makers divert away from some of the important long-term crises. We have the debt crisis that has been mentioned, but also quite a few weaponed, armed conflicts that are, of course, very challenging for anyone living in such conditions. So I would say that peace is the major source of enabling societies to thrive, and with that, to have healthy societies.
But Stefan just referred to the Davos conference. The long-term sort of dangers, armed conflict was not on the list of long-term conflicts. Do decision makers realize the severity of you work closely with the politicians? Do they realize these questions, the severity of it?
Absolutely, but as I said, when we have many crises, we have the challenges of climate-related weather events. We have the health that is being challenged right now due to the fact that we have quite a lot of migratory flows due to the conflicts. And even though I really, really hope that armed conflicts are not part of the long-term challenges, we have seen for quite a few years now prolonged such conflicts. But in the long term, I would say that the challenges with the climate and inequity that has been mentioned, that we need to see that prosperity and societal growth is something that is part of the common global good. We will all gain from the fact that we make societies thrive, and for doing that we need all of the populations within society to have the right to the means to be able to thrive, like for instance their own health.
Okay. So let's talk about the situation we're in right now. He mentioned that 2025 as a year of turmoil, and it is indeed a state of turmoil right now in the world. A looming oil crisis potentially in the Middle East. What does that then mean for if we think about the future of global health, or lawmakers right now? Are they do they really prioritize global health right now?
Well, each moment of turmoil and crises, of course, have its price, but it's also a moment where you can go back and consider what do we need to change in order not to come back to this situation. And I would say that we also need to make use of the momentum that we have right now. And Stefan mentioned the fact that 2025, there was a huge sort of decrease, steep decrease when it came to development assistance, but also exchanges on the global sort of platforms and a loss of trust in many ways. But it also made a lot of countries to consider their own sovereignty and the power they have themselves to do things and not to be too dependent on other countries. So I think we have to make use of this momentum to see what can we push. And we have a different world now than we had for about 30 years ago due to many things. And Stefan also touched upon innovations. We have so many more tools now that we can make use of. And also we've had a lot of societal evolution, and a lot of countries have moved from being low-income countries or lower-middle-income countries. So there has been a lot of gains, and we can never forget about that. And I would like to think of the crises that we are in now in a little bit of a dip of a curve, to look back and see where we're heading.
Right, but also, so if we talk about aid, foreign aid, one of the factors at play here. We all remember the reporting about a year ago when the current U.S. administration came to power and they virtually dismantled U.S. aid. They left the WHO. Countries are decreasing their foreign aid, primarily their developmental assistance, right? Has to be negative consequences. It feels for the advancement of global health.
Of course, there are negative consequences.
Are we seeing those right now?
We see them around the world, but as I said, we also see some changes. In many countries, governments are realizing that they are responsible for investing in health in their own populations. It's a means of accountability and also a means of having the population realizing that their political powers needs to be sort of taking them into account and not being dependent on somebody else overseas in some other country. But we do see challenges, but we also see that also decision makers and politicians realize that we are interdependent. So we cannot turn the back on each other. I mean, we were all very much reminded of that during the pandemic. Yeah. And we need to work together in order to have health security. And with that, there is an interest globally to realize that unless we have dialogues and unless we agree on the fact that we need to work together in this, it will strike back at us, our own health, but also our own development and prosperity.
Would you say so? What about voter opinion attitudes around the world? So we're talking about short-term, long-term, and politicians, of course. They're next election. Is there a general trend among attitudes, opinions among people to aid is becoming something that we care less for?
If you look at the Swedish population, there is still a strong devotion to solidarity. But I think that we as diplomats or scientists or teachers also need to make the general public and citizens aware of that, yes, solidarity is extremely important, but it's also for our own good, and there's not a conflict on these. So we do these out of several reasons. Sweden is one of the few countries in the world that still devotes 0.7% of our gross national income to development assistance and humanitarian aid. And by doing that, it is not only wanting to do good, but we have an interest. We're a country of 0.13% of the global population, and we're extremely dependent on what is happening in the world.
but also to have relations. We're also a country that are dependent on trade. We need to be able to import, we need to be able to export. In our population, 20% of our citizens have a foreign origin, and we have a strong interest in having good relations, and we believe in welfare, as I said initially, and have realized, and our decision makers know this, but they are forced sometimes to have to deal with the acute crises, and that's when we need the general public to remind them of other things are also important. So just to live in a democracy and have free voices, and all the civil society organizations will need to remind also the world where we're heading and where we want to head.
Okay. Let's rewind some 5 or 7 years back to the corona pandemic. You were in the eye of the storm. You've worked at the Swedish Public Health Agency for a long time. The last year of the pandemic, you were its general director here in Sweden. The Swedish model, for those international teachers here, maybe you remember, gained a lot of attention around the world. We never had any true lockdowns, as in many other countries. What did we learn back then?
There were lots of learnings from my part and for the societal part, but I would say that the major learning that we had was that if you have a good public health, and if you focus on the parts of society that are the least, I wouldn't say prepared, but are the least able to cope in the crisis, you will have the largest gains. And for our side, we did not put enough attention to some of the groups in society that had more challenges in adhering to the fact that we needed to have distance to each other. So that was a strong learning, that if we have a good health in our populations, we're more resistant to any type of health crises, but also that we need to have a stronger focus on the groups in society that maybe live very crowded, or they work in professions where they have to keep society working in service sector, in delivering all the goods that we need to have life to go on. And then also the fact that we need to be better prepared, of course.
Are we?
Yes.
They say, experts say that it's a matter of time. It's not a matter of if next pandemic will come.
I would agree on that. I mean, we kept being reminded all the time. And since we had the pandemic, we've had several challenges, one being Mpox on the African continent that quite rapidly spread globally when we started to interact with each other. So, of course, there will be pandemics to come, and we are better prepared in some ways, but we're not prepared enough, I would say. And in order to look ahead, we also need to have a more deeper understanding on when we have a health crisis. There is no black and white solution. There's not one way to do it, because there will be two sides of the coin all the time. And that was something that we tried to convey to the general public in Sweden, that yes, if we want to stop an infection to spread, the easiest way to do that is to stop interacting. But we have a society where we need to interact. People will have heart attacks. We will have elderly populations that will need to be cared of. We will have children that needs to be taken care of. And we also realized quite early that this is not going to end after a week or two. And whom are the groups in society that will suffer? And working at the public health agency, we were not only responsible for communicable diseases, but also for the determinants of health. And we know very well that one of the most important determinants of health, what enables people to grow up and become healthy individuals, is to make sure that children have their right to be in school. And we did a lot of analysis to see what will the consequences be if we close the schools. And again, it's not just one that will suffer or one that will win, whether we decide to have the schools open or to have them closed. But all the time we try to look at the coin from different angles and see, as a society, how will we come out the best out of this.
Right. Stefan ended on an optimistic note, saying, yes, we can. Are you optimistic about the future of global health?
Yes, I don't think that we can sort of not be optimistic.
Okay.
We have so many innovations, we have so many breakthroughs, and also we have the tool of knowledge, and we have power shifts throughout the world, where today, even though we have a lot of inequity left, there is a lot more empowerment in countries that didn't used to have schools or education, university, and knowledge is something that is one of the strongest tools we have.
Karin, Tegmark, Wisell, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you. And our next speaker has 25 years of experience of leading research projects in Europe, Africa, and Asia related to sexual reproductive health and rights. She has a Master of Public Health from Harvard School of Public Health, and since 2013 she is a professor in global infectious disease epidemiology at Karolinska Institutet. Please welcome Anna-Mia Ekström.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here today, really proud to be able to talk to you about HIV, and later this afternoon also more on comprehensive sexuality education in the workshop. This is, I'll come back to this picture. I don't know if you see if the light is too strong on the screen, but perhaps it's easy to see. This is the Lakeside School in Rakai, Uganda, that I've collaborated with in the last 15 years or so. And these are among the children who were most heavily and immediately struck by the cuts in global HIV funding last year. My most important message today is that HIV is not AIDS. I think many of you know that, but not everyone, unfortunately. We still hear people saying HIV/AIDS a lot. And as an HIV clinician, I worked with HIV patients as an infectious disease doctor also for the last 20 or so years. This is something I really, really don't want people to do. HIV is not AIDS. This was before antiretroviral treatment became available. 10 years in the mid-1990s in high-income countries, but 10 years later in lower-income countries, including sub-Saharan Africa, where the problem was also in the burden and the need was so much greater. More than 88 million people have been infected by HIV since the HIV pandemic started in the 1980s, and more than 40 million people have died from AIDS. And I think it's really important that we stop saying the pandemic as if it was only COVID that is the pandemic. COVID is one of many pandemics, but the HIV pandemic is something that is still ongoing every day, every minute. And today, more than 40 million people are living with HIV globally. And as you see on this graph from the IHME, the Institute of Health Metrics, HIV is still a major burden and the leading cause of death among women of reproductive age in sub-Saharan Africa, even today. And it's really important to understand that HIV is not what it was 20, 25, or even 40 years ago. HIV is a virus that many of you know that spreads via body fluids. I'm sure you know this, and it harms us by entering a few of our immune cells that have a CD4 entry point on their cell surface. But most of our cells cannot be invaded by HIV. But it does enter this important coordinating cell in our immune defense and thereby slowly harms our immune defense. And once the immune defense becomes really weak, we also get susceptible to other infections and even cancers, and that is what AIDS is. But if you initiate treatment early enough, and even when AIDS has developed, you can turn this process entirely. and live a long and healthy life and never be at risk of transmitting HIV to anyone, give birth to healthy babies, and even have unprotected sex. So this is a fantastic development. And this is on average if you don't get treatment, the average period from becoming infected to actually developing AIDS is about 10 years, but it can be as rapid as 6 months or even up to 25 years, even without treatment. But the point is to initiate it early and test early. So in 2024, 77% of all people living with HIV in the world actually had access to this fantastic treatment. And out of those who were on treatment, 94% had undetectable viral load, which is fantastic. It means they can't transmit it. U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. This was very different 25 years ago. When the first time I came to Entebbe in Uganda, I remember that child coffins were built and sold along the road from the airport into the capital of Kampala. And this was quite shocking for me, coming from a country where this was not the case. Now it's completely different and would never want to go back there. But the share of deaths were even above 50% in some countries in Southern Africa at the time. And these are photos the WHO, the World Health Organization, used to promote the 3x5 campaign, that 3 million people would have access to ARTs in 2005. And now it's actually, as I mentioned, more than 27 million that have, or more than 30 million have access to ART, and more than 27 million lives have been saved thanks to this. So you see the amazing impact of these drugs. And thanks to treatment, but also thanks to awareness, prevention, not the least in schools, talking about HIV, how it transmits and how you can protect yourself. We have cut new infections by 40% only in the last 15 years. And AIDS deaths have been cut by 54% in the last 15 years since 2010. So this is a remarkable success. And how do we prevent HIV? I'm sure most people know that condoms protect, obviously, but everybody doesn't use condom. Everybody can't use condoms. So there are other ways of also protecting against HIV. And one of the most important things that research has shown is keeping girls in school, in fact. That is why when schools were locked for a long time during the COVID pandemic, girls were at higher risk. And now, as the funding for HIV prevention is cut, girls are again at highest risk. And girls aged 15 to 24 years of age is by far the highest risk group for new infections in sub-Saharan Africa. We also know that safer sex messaging works better than no sex messaging. To abstain is not something that people can always choose to do or want to do. We need to treat other sexually transmitted infections. Multiple concurrent partnerships is especially problematic. If someone is newly infected in a sexual network, it easily spreads. And pre-exposure prophylaxis, also using 2 instead of 3 antiretroviral medications, but packed into one tablet before high-risk sex and after, is something that really is incredibly effective in terms of preventing HIV in groups at high risk. And recently, a little bit less than 2 years ago, there were breaking news that a long-time injectable, only using 1 injection every 6 months, gave 100% protection among young women from becoming infected with HIV. And this was a fantastic breakthrough. And I, who've worked with HIV for almost all of my professional life, sort of thought, okay, what should I do until I retire? This is over. We've combated, AIDS, which was fantastic. But then everything changed in January 2025. We'll come back to that. Just before that, the fantastic success of having reduced mother-to-child transmission of HIV from 500,000 children per year to 120,000. The risk has dropped from around 1 in 3 to less than 2%, thanks to ART. The problem today is still that most people don't know that. It's stigma. This is a photo from the clinic where I work. It's Södersjukhuset here, just 5 minutes from here, where it's an HBTQ-friendly corridor in terms of colors. and people can be confidential when they seek care. While if you come to a pharmacy like this to pick up your ARVs, you may just ask for paracetamol and go home, because your neighbor might be standing behind you. As I mentioned, everything changed in January for global health and for HIV. As a global development assistance was cut overday and a work stop order was executed, it became really difficult to deliver the services that save people every day. And the censorship of health communication was particularly serious. The United States has been incredibly generous in terms of, and important in terms of development assistance over many, many years. And every year, around 3 million lives or even more were saved thanks to development assistance from the United States. So it's been so important, and that's why it's also so serious when it was cut so drastically and rapidly. And the handover was also very difficult for people who had to sort of take care of this without really having the information, the drugs, or the staff to deliver services. Not only the United States, but several other EU countries, including my own, unfortunately, has cut development aid over the past 2 years. And we see that in particular, sub-Saharan Africa, the highest, the curve at the top here, has had very rapid reductions in development assistance, and also many of our joint global institutions like the UN, the WHO, and UNICEF, and the Global Fund. And we see that from the figures from OECD shows that the cut will be there, but it could be lower or higher impact depending on what countries decide to do this year. We're already spending almost 300 times more on health in a country like Sweden than in most low-income countries. So disparities, even before these cuts, were huge. But these will increase in the next 5 years unless something is done to prevent this. We also know that most HIV prevention efforts were actually financed by overseas development assistance, while countries have more opportunity to actually pay for treatment. The preventive aspects will suffer. It's the dark red color here. Up to 100% for some of the preventive actions in some countries are now unfunded, more or less. And this will obviously have a huge impact on HIV infections. We fear that new infections could increase by over 4 million over the next 5 years or 4 years, additional infections as compared to what we already have, more than 1.3 million new infections per year, and deaths are also likely to increase. And the most vulnerable groups will pay the biggest price. Young girls in particular, but also LGBTQI+ populations and young women. Because not only HIV is cut, but also sexual and reproductive health and services in general. The WHO's Director General, Tedros, whom also will be speaking to you, recorded this afternoon, as far as I understand. He said a month ago that global health systems are really at risk as funding cuts bite, and that 2025 was one of the most difficult years in WHO's history. And we see the WHO is cutting down by 25 to 40%. And when all other institutions, our global institutions, are also cutting down, who is going to deliver global health? This means that the risk of pandemics has really increased, as well as the risk of drug-resistant infections that my colleague will talk about later on, and fragile health services. This is also something that Bill Gates warned about, and we also already see that hunger is increasing again. It increased during the COVID pandemic drastically, came down, now it's back. And WHO had planned to save another 50 million lives over the next 5 years via vaccines. We really, really, really hope that this will still be possible. We need to start talking about vaccination again and the incredible importance of vaccination. Over 154 million lives have been saved through vaccination in the past 50 years, most of them children. What about the impact on school children of these cuts? Well, we do fear that more girls will be pushed out of school and that more children will go hungry, which also, of course, impacts the ability to learn. Back then to Uganda, I visited this school just a few weeks after the Trump administration had informed the world that they would cut HIV funding and PEPFAR. They paused it for 90 days first. And immediately 10 children were taken out of this school by their parents because they were living with HIV and so were the parents, and they expected them to die. And there was no point in paying school fees anymore. And this was so incredibly sad. With joint efforts, the children were brought back to school. Most of these children, the children on these pictures are not living with HIV, by the way. Their classmates were not there. Their positive class words were not there on this day. But they came back, but uncertainty is huge. And also very concerning, of course, for parents. And there's obviously, this is not done because there's a lack of money. For less than 1% of what we today spend on military defense, we could end the AIDS pandemic in less than 5 years. So we can if we want, and the tools we have today are so fantastic. Remember what I said about injectable PrEP? The amazing treatments that we have that completely turns people's lives around from being weeks away from death. You take a pill, a month later, you are able to go to school again, work, bicycle. I have so many examples of this. It almost gives me goosebumps when I think about it because I've seen this miracle happen so many times. We have these tools. Let's use them. And we need to be solution-oriented today. The Global South is, to a very large extent, more maybe than the northern part, the Global North today. There are many ways we could actually generate more funding, like scaling up taxes for alcohol and tobacco, for example, write off some of the health debts that Stefan Swartling mentioned, and also, of course, invest in local production of vaccines and medication in Africa, for example. Also rescue the data that is so important to follow and monitor these trends. So to end, of course, we can get through this together. There's so many smart, engaged people out there. You are among them, and we're in this together. Thank you.
Hanna Ekström, everybody. Thank you.
Cholera is a very serious issue caused by the lack of clean drinking water or just overall clean water to clean the stuff around the house. I think let's solve the clean water problem. I think let's make sure everyone has access to clean drinking water and doesn't get sick with waterborne diseases.
One health challenge people face in my community is air pollution. In many Serbian cities, poor air quality causes breathing problems and worsens existing respiratory disease.
I believe antimicrobial resistance is one of the most important issues the world needs to focus on. When antibiotics stop working, even common infection can become life-threatening.
A common health issue people near me face is iron deficiency, especially in teenagers. This is a common health issue because teenagers need a lot more nutrients than in any other age. We have our irregular eating habits and we consume more junk food than others, which is why this problem is caused.
I think the most important issue is equal distribution of vaccines, because I know that they're not very equally distributed across the world and they're very crucial.
One health challenge
I notice in my community is frequent consumption of energy drinks and vaping. Many young people use them daily without recognizing the problem and long-term effects on the heart and brain.
Our next speaker is a professor emeritus of infectious diseases at Uppsala University, one of the world's leading experts on antibiotic resistance. Please give a warm welcome to Otto.
Thank you so very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I will make another deep dive in the ocean of global health, and I will try in this short lecture to convince you that antibiotic resistance is one of the most pressing issues we have to deal with in global health today. I will be a very condensed lecture with worrying trends I will show you, but also pointing on the opportunities we have to really deal with this if we do it together, all of us. Let's first go a little bit back in history. I don't know whether you can see this. Maybe you can. It's too dark. It's in any way it's a painting to be found in London in the Tate Gallery. It's called The Doctor. The doctor is sitting there thinking. There's a feverish child, maybe with pneumonia. There's a worrying father in the background. What can he do? The doctor. Bring down fever, relieve thirst, relieve pain, and just wait and hope. The death rate in pneumonia at that time in children was around 50% or even more. At that time in hospitals, there were something called the septic wards. It could also call this chambers of horrors, where people with sinusitis, meningitis, bone infections, joint infections, and many more of these infections were kept. They were kept there, not treated because there was no treatment. The treatment was sometimes amputation, and many people, of course, died. Then everything changed. Then came penicillin. There are many books describing the success of penicillin and the discovery. One is titled Triumph and Tragedy. And let's start with the triumph. So there are two slides here that are really important. The first is a very famous culture plate that you all, I think, have heard about. That was the microbiologist Alexander Fleming noted in his laboratory when he came back from a vacation. The mold up there was killing the bacteria on the plate somehow. There was something in the mold. That something was later called penicillin. And together with the other colleagues, Howard Florey and Ernst Chain, Alexander Fleming got the Nobel Prize here in Stockholm 80 years ago. It's not a long time, 80 years. We have built all health systems in the world in 8 years due to penicillin. And also, it's not only health, it's also social and economic development. So, we will have some props here. So Oscar, my colleague, will bring up something just to show you what it's all about and what we have been built on the. First of all, a quick poll. How many of you have never ever taken an antibiotic course? Okay, no one. These are the antibiotic pillars, all right? And on this we have the common infections in society, pneumonia, wound infections, urinary tract infections, and not the least sepsis, where bacteria can often be found in the blood, and where every hour to treatment, delayed treatment, is a risking to die. Then we have maternal and child health. With gonorrhea at 40,000 cases a year globally, and if not treated, could lead to infertility. You have the children, and you have the mothers with complicated births. Then we have the modern medicine with hip replacements, organ transplants. Everything is counting on existing effective antibiotics. And then on the top is cancer. Why? Well, because cancer patients are treated with radiation or cytostatic drugs. This reduces the immune defenses. We simply need to have antibiotics available to treat these cases. Otherwise, mortality will become very high. Is it stable, Oscar, you think? Oh. Put it up back, please. I'm not sure about it stable, really. So that was the triumph. Now comes the tragedy. Quickly, and this will be really, really quick. Bacteria are everywhere. Everywhere. In the animals, in the environment, in the human being. In the human being, in the gut, and in the skin, and many other places. We have 40 trillion bacteria in our bodies. Most of them are friends. They could do a lot for us. They digest the foods, they stimulate the immune defenses. We just simply need them. They are our friends. They need us. We need them. Very, very few gives rise to infections. But in large populations of bacteria, there is always a few resistant ones. This is because bacteria mutate regularly every 30 minutes. And then, by chance, someone becomes resistant. They don't take over the population. When we use antibiotics, then they can grow and take over the population like this. It might get back over time, but over time, over decades, these multi-resistant and multi-resistant bacteria are common and are spreading globally, also like pandemics. We talk about One Health perspective. So everything comes together here. Animal use, human use, the spread in the environment, reflux of antibiotics, spread of bacteria, creating a global pandemic situation where many of these bacteria are traveling around. We can do something about it, but we have been very slow in acting. We are not using water, hand hygiene, prevention as much as we should. This is one very simple and extremely important part of the solution. We are still overusing and overconsumption antibiotics for unnecessary purposes. This is a pharmacy in low and middle income countries in Asia. And this is in Europe, in one EU country, in the southern EU. A friend of my son had a sore throat and went to a pharmacy, and he got all this. Antibiotics and something else and something else and something else. I think at the end he decided not to take the antibiotics though, because he was warned. But it's still there. So we're not earning these fantastic drugs the respect they should have. Absolutely not. One thing is important, it's not only overuse. There's a lot of need of access to effective antibiotics that it's an equity issue. So in many parts of the world, many patients like these ones die because there is no antibiotics around at all. That access balance is not easy to deal with in these countries, for sure. And then this one, why not only new antibiotics fix the problem? No, because it's so difficult. And this chain, new antibiotics marketing, overuse, overconsumption, and resistance has moved around for decades. It's broken. And the over-reliance has been a challenge. And I think still many politicians, unfortunately, think that the big pharmaceutical companies will come back. They won't, I think, because most have left this. And this is the number of classes over time that we have been offered by the pharmaceutical industry. Now small companies and academic groups is trying to fill this void, but it's not easy. It's scientifically really difficult, and the business model, of course, is not working because we don't want this to be oversold in the future. So that's another challenge that we need top minds, researchers, new research areas into this to fix this. So, what does this leave us? Well, the trends are absolutely clear. Antibiotics resistance is increasing. People are increasingly dying from infections that are not treatable with available antibiotics, particularly in low and middle-income countries. Today there are 1.2 million deaths from antibiotic-resistant bacteria globally, which is on par with the sum of the total mortality for HIV and malaria together. It's a huge burden out there. And modern medicine is at stake. And again, some cancer treatments cannot be performed safely without effective antibiotics. So this pyramid will eventually, now, it will crumble. Unless, we must prevent this from happening and rapidly change the current trajectories. We know exactly since way back what we have to do. Over the last 10 years, there has been enormous political action and more also action in many countries. There has been a global action plan, there have been political declarations, commitments, but still the real action is still missing, and we're moving too slowly with this. So, if we look upon a country, amazingly, most countries, almost all countries in the world have a national action plan against antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial resistance. It's fantastic, but it's a lot to do, as you can see. All of this needs to be done for a sustainable access to effective antibiotics, which is what we have to aim for, which is the vision we have to have. And this will take long. Obviously, this is a systems perspective thing. You have to strengthen systems long term. And this costs money, political will, and efforts. But I'm pointing here on the corner, left corner, because in these national action plans, if you go through them and look at what the content is, obviously education, awareness raising, and behavior change has not been the most prominent areas, which there should be, because this is all about behavior change. On the political level, on the ground level, in schools, and in the general population. So this is my main message at the end here. We could fix this by empowering the new generation. Meantime, of course, political will increase, financing need to increase, global solidarity need to increase. But this part is important. There is a workshop of today for those of you who are interested to learn a bit more about this problem and what can be done, and more specific sort of tips on what you can use in the classroom. There have been 2 documents coming out recently, one from REACT, which is a 20-year-old international network that we created here in Sweden and now is present in Latin America, Africa, and Asia since many years back. There's a toolbox, and that contains also a specific sites or pages on youth. And also a new Fleming initiative recently has been coming up with some thoughts about the common education agenda for schools, which is also of great interest. So I think if this is moving, and if you as teachers take this on and try to engage the young generation, there is some hope, because this is really a worrying situation. I've shared my frustration, but I will also share my hope by showing this wonderful slide from REACT's work in Africa and Latin America and in Asia. Young people can do a lot. The power of knowledge. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Otto.
And we will continue with our program. I have the great pleasure and honor to welcome our next guest. A warm hand to Professor Perlmann. Perlmann, you are so very welcome. You are a professor at the Karolinska Institute here in Stockholm. And you are also the secretary for the Nobel Committee for Physiology or Medicine. And I dare to say that I know exactly what you are doing every year, some minutes before the public announcement of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. This is always on a Monday. It's in the beginning of October, and you give some calls, trying to get hold of the laureates who doesn't know that they are laureates, but to tell them that they are laureates. That is kind of a strange and interesting task you have.
Yes, it is. So actually, I mean, the Nobel Prize, not everyone knows that. I mean, we actually make the decision the same day as we announce it. And some ask, how can you do that? I mean, of course, we have a press material and so forth. So we have a good idea what's going to be decided. But after the decision, we have the meeting 9 o'clock in the morning. And then I have an hour and a half to try and reach the laureates by phone. And yeah, it is interesting. I usually sit down at my desk and think a little bit about what I'm about to do, because the Nobel Prize, in contrast to other science prizes, is so special and has this weight. So there are no other prizes that actually transforms the recipient's identity. Maybe not the whole identity, but their professional identity will never be the same again. They will from now on be the Nobel laureate this and this, and not doctor this and this. And that is pretty amazing, and it feels like some weight to deliver that transformative message to them. Yeah. But it's interesting. It's a very small part of my job.
Yes, but an interesting one.
Yeah.
So the reactions. What are they?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm
sorts.
from Sweden. I'm transforming your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after a while, they some have been actually persistently claiming that this must be a joke or a prank call. But there are those who actually are overwhelmed, not say anything. It's a little bit hard to know, if they have suspected that they are on a short list, or some may have, of course. But in a few cases, I know they are not expecting anything. And that's a couple of occasions when they are actually angry, because I'm calling, of course, in the middle of the night in some places. And one laureate, Harvey Alter, for example, he was very upset.
Yeah. That's how upset he was. Yes.
Yeah, very. He was incredibly angry, but he's a wonderful person, and we joked about it when we met after that, and he became very friendly very fast, I could say, even during the phone call. So.
As you said, you're not only the messenger, you're also part of the decision, and that is a long work and a process. Alfred Nobel, he wrote, as we earlier said in his testament, that the prizes should be awarded to those who have done something beneficial for humankind. Is this still the leading star when you discuss who's going to get the prize?
I definitely think so. I think it's been persistent and constant throughout the years from 1901. Of course, I mean, it's pretty easy for us because medicine is obviously to the benefit of humankind. I mean, that's what it's all about. Of course, it's a little bit the discoveries that we are awarding. I mean, sometimes they're very basic, but it's pretty clear, even Alfred Nobel's own vision, it was quite evident that he understood that it all starts with basic science. So we award both very basic ideas about medicine and physiology, but also things that are really developments to treatments. So yeah, I think it's really our leading star that we move towards.
Yeah, and we're talking about global health today, and if we, as you said, it's kind of obvious when it comes to medicine or vaccines or whatever within the field. But if you were to pick a couple of Nobel Prizes in history that really have affected the global health, what would they be?
there's so many, so I could spend an hour on it easily. But I think what comes to mind, I think, are infectious diseases, and that's really, I mean, something that has plagued humankind forever. Nowadays, it's a threat to everyone, but in particular, it's a very big problem in the global south, obviously. And there are many discoveries there. I mean, one can think of Max Theiler, the first prize for a vaccine, yellow fever, immensely important. Enders, Weller, and Robbins, who received the prize for discoveries around polio virus that actually enabled vaccines to be developed. Again, very important. There are later prizes, for example, the prize to UU, who won the prize for actually discovering a treatment for one of the really important plagues of the world, the malaria. Very recent, 2023, the prize to Carrico and Weissman, who made discoveries that enabled the development of mRNA vaccines that were so important during the pandemic, COVID-19. And I should say that the mRNA vaccines are also, I think, a tremendous development, or at least the potential for it. We'll have to wait and see a little bit for the more low-income and middle-income countries, where for a couple of reasons. mRNA vaccines are cheaper, faster to develop, they're more easy to make. There's one drawback, namely that they require cold chains to store and deliver, but those things are solvable, and I think will have an incredible importance for global health more worldwide.
And we're speaking about inequality today. We have done so, and we will continue to do so. So would you say that, I mean, because the chain is long from having an idea, going to the laboratory, and then getting a treatment that is used by people all over the world, hopefully. So do you consider that accessibility to a medicine or a vaccine in your choosing of a laureate?
Absolutely. I mean, we do. And of course, I mean, to develop a medicine is a long chain of events. And what we have to remember when it comes to the Nobel Prize, and that is that something that Alfred Nobel decided in his testament, and I think it's of immense value also for the prize, that is that in the science areas, we are awarding discoveries. And we sit in our committee and discuss what is a discovery. And of course, I mean, sometimes it is hard to identify a discovery in some of the phases leading to, for example, a development of a drug. It could be characterized more as a development phase, despite the fact that it's fantastic achievements, but maybe not easy to find the real discoveries there. And that's one reason why, actually, when we award fantastic breakthroughs that have had such importance for global health, that it's often very basic discoveries that initiates the events. I think a very good example is the one I mentioned with Katalin Karikó and Drew Weissman for the mRNA vaccine. It was really driven by her vision concerning mRNA, to use it for health. But their discovery was very basic. It was really showing something that made it understandable how one really should design these mRNA vaccines. So it made it possible. But later in the chain, it's sometimes hard. It can be hundreds of people involved in developing a drug at the company, and hard to award with a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, you need to choose one, two, or three.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
But I should say that it all starts with very fundamental big discoveries. When they are available to humankind, to other scientists, to companies, to innovators, then, I mean, it will happen. So I think it's so important to remember that these fundamental initial discoveries, they are very important.
And that is also something that Nobel Prize laureates often stress, the importance of fundamental research.
Yes.
Coming back to that.
Exactly.
Need the understanding before we can...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What would you say from your perspective would be the greatest challenges for global health now and in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a global health expert, but I think, I mean, evidently infectious disease continues to be one of the really big challenges. I mean, it is a threat and problem for all of us, but on a global scale, for the low middle income countries, it's an even bigger threat and problem. But I would say that it's also a trend, a long-term trend towards us all becoming more similar to each other, and that's of course a good thing. As development has led to increased income in many places, also the health issues become more similar. So I think it's evident that an increasing health issues also in low and middle income countries are associated, for example, with metabolic disease such as diabetes. Obesity is becoming more of a problem in many more places in the world, and of course cancer. An aging population, although it's much more evident, for example, here in Scandinavia, it is also happening in other places of the world and all over the world, associated with many diseases, including neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. So I think we're becoming more equal, and I think we're going to see discoveries and Nobel Prizes affecting or with big breakthroughs, for example, in cancer and obesity, diabetes, that will be immensely important for global health overall.
So teachers meeting many students, the laureates to be. So if anyone of these students asks how to become a laureate, so what's the recipe?
I think one should listen to the laureates themselves, and what they say is, do not aspire to become a Nobel laureate, because that is not the driving force that drove them usually forward. I think it is the excitement about discovery, about working with science and being also interested in what could be benefits to humankind in the long term. I think it's such an awarding area to be interested in, and I think all teachers here already know that, and that's what drives teachers, and I think it's just to continue on that path, to encourage that curiosity among young people. I think that's the key, because I mean Nobel Prizes, they are Nobel laureates. They are usually or very often very brilliant individuals, but they have also, I think they themselves can tell us that they had luck. They were at the right place at the right time, and there are many rewarding, such rewarding progress in science that you can make without it leading to a Nobel Prize, and it's still very interesting and encouraging.
You are, as we said, working hard now in deciding who's going to be the laureate in physiology or medicine in October. Nothing you want to share with us now? Well, I mean, we can keep a secret, right?
I could, but I have to turn off my microphone first.
So we are all looking forward to that immensely. And thank you so much for being here, Professor Thomas Perlmann. A warm hand.
Thank you.
And now we will have a greeting to all of you from Director General Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization.
Dear colleagues and friends, teachers shape the future more than any other profession. Over the course of your careers, each of you will influence thousands of young lives, not only through what you teach, but through the values you model every day. If there is one powerful way to safeguard the well-being of those students and of generations to come, It's by putting health and well-being at the heart of education. When learners are healthy, they attend school more regularly, learn more effectively, and thrive emotionally and socially. And when schools actively promote physical, mental, and social well-being, they become places where children can reach their full potential. That's why the World Health Organization is working to foster health, promoting education systems that support nutritious food, physical activity, mental health, safety, and inclusion. As teachers, you're central to this effort. Your daily work has a ripple effect far beyond the classroom, shaping healthier families, stronger communities, and more resilient societies. Thank you for your dedication, your leadership, and your commitment to nurturing not only minds, but healthy futures. I thank you.
So now it is time for our next guest, Morten Meldal, the professor of the University of Copenhagen.
Yes.
And one of the 2022 Nobel Laureates in chemistry. We heard that Thomas Perlmann from the medicine committee said that it's easy to give out the prize in medicine because the benefit is so obvious. But the benefit of chemistry to you is obvious as well.
Absolutely. Chemistry is everything. And because chemistry is everything, medicine, biology, materials, and so on are just subsets of chemistry. So, in my opinion, the chemistry award is extremely important because it encourages the young people. I mean, the Nobel Prize is a pinnacle of your scientific career. It's an absolute fantastic thing to get the Nobel Prize. And as we heard from the previous speaker, it's a complete life-changing event. It changes not only your own life, but your whole family life, your institution's life is changed by the Nobel Prize. And therefore, I think it's also important to realize how much that means for the young people who are going into to learn about chemistry.
Did you believe, when you got the call from Stockholm, did you believe it was true?
No, because I think they are called Temper. They called me the week before every single day from Stockholm, asking me if I wanted to buy their instrument because they knew I'd got some funding for this. And I thought that when I saw the Swedish number on the phone, this is Temper again. So I answered very briskly on the phone, and there was a long pause in the other end, and then this is the Nobel Prize Committee. Then I was very silent for a while, but it was a fantastic, life-changing event.
And you received the prize for, I mean, sometimes the prize goes to things that, like, well, we have a laureate here for a couple of years ago who received the prize for asymmetric organocatalysis. That's hard to say, even, let alone understand. You received the prize for click chemistry.
Yes.
That's easier to say, but is it easier to understand as well?
The picture is right there, right? Click chemistry, you're clicking things together.
Yeah.
It's very easy to understand.
What is it that you click together?
So click chemistry is really a kind of a Velcro that only attaches to itself. So you can do anything you like with it and build small molecular robots that can do stuff for us, like a completely new paradigm in medicine, where you can make robots that can recognize, can transfer, and can do things to the cell or to the environment. So we have a completely new tool in the toolbox with click chemistry.
And I mean, you obviously from Denmark, it seems like, I mean, I guess everyone asks you, is this like building Legos?
Yes, it's, as I said, Velcro or Lego, you can decide. It's just easy, and it goes really, even with very sensitive molecules like sensitive proteins and carbohydrates and so on, you can just stick them together to make these multifunctional molecules. And you can also use it in many other ways, like in materials, in surface derivatization of surfaces, so they get special properties. Those things you can do with it. So, but I think that we're not here to discuss click chemistry, but teaching.
We'll get there. Because, well, I wanted to ask, because teaching and learning, because when we talk about the benefit of chemistry, that's obviously important. That's one of the reasons why people should learn it. But did you start to study chemistry because of the benefits that you thought would come out of it? Or do you study chemistry because
No,
you
I
liked
studied
it?
because I'm so curious about what everything is. I mean, that's what's driving philosophy through the centuries, right? What is it? Why are we here? Or how are we here? And this is understood best through natural sciences, of course, not so much through other means. So I had an interest in natural science from a very early age. It was only when I started making fireworks that I really got the interest for chemistry itself. That was really fun.
But well, there are several things I would like to ask about the fireworks, but let's move on to, maybe that's not why we're here. But so when we teach chemistry, do we teach that it's important, or do we teach that it's something that you're curious about, or both?
I think we teach chemistry a little bit like it's a side show here, and then we have life here, and then we have chemistry, and you have to learn this chemistry over here. But actually, chemistry is the foundation of all of this. So we have to actually teach it in a bit different way, in my opinion. One thing that I'm very sure about in my own teaching in the university is that you only learn when you want to learn. That means that you have to tickle the curiosity with the children also in a very early stage. Now, chemistry is just like this world, which is composed of chemistry, a three-dimensional world. We try to teach that on a piece of paper in 2 dimensions, formulas, calculus, and so on. And I don't think that's a way to reach the young people. I think we could reach even first graders with chemistry if we just showed them the magnificent world that you can animate, of how we can transform water into hydrogen and oxygen and use that as an energy source in everything we're doing instead of the fossil fuels. Explain the difference. What is happening when we burn all the fossil fuels, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Why is that warming our Earth? And how can we avoid that?
So is it about giving, well, students and everyone, I guess, a new way to look at the world, a new way to see the world?
Yeah, but it's also about the children, because when you are born into this world, you have no language, you have no concepts, you have nothing. And you are starting learning about this by your vision. So the children are very good at taking in information as vision, as images that are stored in the brain, making a mirror image of the outside world that help them navigate it. And if you, I usually say in the lectures, try to close your eyes and think back on something that happened when you were 5 years old, a birthday or a trip in the forest or beach, something that made an impression on you, you can actually remember details down to where the single stone was, how the sky was looking, and so on. And if you just go 10 years back, you cannot do that. So children have a very unique ability to store images. And if they learn chemistry by images, by a three-dimensional world, they will take it in a completely different way. You could even give the atoms emotional properties if you want, because emotion is a big part of learning. So I think that the evil mercury, the aggressive oxygen, or the very nice and soft carbon, or the smelly sulfur, they can have a lot of properties that actually make the children get this instinctively understanding, just like we have. I mean, taking a spoon from a plate and putting it in your mouth is a very complex function, very complex thing to do. And the children can do it because they have learned in this way when they were small. And I think we can do the same with teaching, in particular in chemistry, so that we end up with teaching them at the bachelor level when they leave high school. In science in particular, and in chemistry, very, very much in chemistry, but also the other sciences, physics. You can also see physics as a three-dimensional world, right? Yeah. Of waves and so on. If we can illustrate that in a consistent way, make a consistent teaching material that can be used globally, we can really change the world with this kind of education.
Yeah, I like the emotional part. I know that the 18th century Swedish chemist Torben Bergman, he described chemical affinity using words like friendship. So it seems like this is something that sort of works.
It stems back to Democrit. He is, in my opinion, the most fantastic philosopher ever. Democrit, who defined chemistry 300 or 400 years before Christ as small particles, the finite elements that comes together and give you citrus smell and earth character, fire, and so on. So he had these elements, the smallest building blocks of life, already several hundred years before Christ. I think he was amazing.
Yeah, and that also seems like one effect of this, if you teach, chemistry in a more integrated way, to make that part of chemistry and maybe science to be more part of the general education, that we all know a bit of science, because it helps to understand the world more.
Yeah, and it should be about the important things. So we talked about energy, but you also have the food sciences, all our textiles. What are we doing there? All the polymers and materials that are in our phones and computers and so on. About the materials that, what is this made from? And there's so many different things that are important for us in our daily life, which you can make important for the students because it becomes part of their daily life.
And to students, especially then in school, because when they reach the university, they may decide to become scientists. But if you're a student and you know, I don't want to be a scientist, I want to be an economist or a writer.
Happening too often.
Yeah, but is it still? But is it? Yeah. But is it also for them important? Maybe even more important for them to also know some science.
I think so. I think it's very important that we broadly know more about science, because that will make us be able to understand what actually happens with the global warming, and be able to make the right political choices when we are electing people. To know, not only give us an extra 2,000 kroners in our daily salary or our monthly salary, but also be able to solve the long-term problems that we are going to face, which are going to be much more expensive than in 2000 that you're getting.
But do you also have a richer experience of the world around you?
Yeah, that's it. Yes, that's it. So your curiosity is being satisfied by understanding. And understanding requires your knowledge about the surrounding universe. I love to learn about what is going on out there, we are living in an amazing universe, and there's a lot to understand about conditions and situations which are completely different from what we have here on Earth. I think that's very exciting, philosophically, and also just scientifically very exciting to know about the big scale as well as the very small scale.
Yeah, and and you obviously, well, of course, you meet students in your work, but also meet young people and maybe school children sometimes. When you do, of course, you teach them things, but what do you learn from them, from these meetings?
Oh, I learn a lot. I learn a lot about how people are seeing themselves, how they are approaching their knowledge. I learn how what tickles curiosity with children when I have these kind of talks. Also talk a lot to in public lectures, where it's very important to use humor as well. And I think that humor is a very good tool in the teaching process, because if you have a good laugh, you remember it.
And when you, as a researcher, is teaching important for you as a researcher as well? Or is it taking time? Sometimes you hear that it takes time from a researcher.
This was defined in Germany like 500 years ago or so. And there is, in a university, an equal proportion of dissemination to the younger, upcoming scientists, as there is research that you are doing yourself.
Mhm.
And it's about 50-50, and it should be.
Mhm.
So I think that's extremely important also because for me, it's a great, great privilege to be 72 years old and still be allowed to be with people who are in their 20s, hungering for knowledge, and maybe I can help them a little bit. At least I can show them the way that they can achieve their own knowledge. So I think that's a very privileged situation.
I think that sometimes we forget that when we see, for example, at the Nobel Prize ceremony, everyone talks about these are 10 researchers sitting here, but there is also 10 teachers sitting there, and we don't talk about that enough, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think this dissemination is just as important as the research itself. The novelty comes by not yourself, but by an excellent team that you put together that are doing research in the lab, and you are sharing in a collaborative manner the research with your colleagues, and that leads to the great results. So it's not one brain that works all the time. It's like 10 brains simultaneously working like a concert directed by someone, and it really is beautiful to look at.
And now you are a teacher and you're in a room full of teachers. How was, some people may be nervous about 300 teachers in a room, but how was school for you? Did you like your teachers?
Well, I was always interested in other stuff than what went on in the school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not that I didn't do anything, but I didn't do what I should do, for sure. And I was not very good when I left school.
Mm-hmm.
Was not, I think I got like very mediocre grades, even from high school, because I was doing all sorts of other things. And those things actually, so in my opinion, the real researcher has to have some character of being a rebel. If you're not a rebel, you don't question anything. And that's your problem as a researcher. If you don't ask the questions, you're not getting the answers, right? So if you are curious and if you have a rebel character, you have a good chance of becoming a good researcher, even with bad grades in the high school. And I am the living proof of that.
That's actually, I think it's a very good insight. And last year, one of the economics prize winners, Joel Mokir, he actually won an economics prize for saying that innovation is an act of rebellion. So it's a Nobel certified idea.
Yes. So it goes much further than just the research in the lab, because it's also the establishment around is based on research that happened 20 years ago, and they are very conservative about that. So when you come in with a new idea, you really have to fight for it to get it through. So it's regarded by economy, the established economy, as a rebellion when you're coming with a disrupting new technology.
But does that mean that it's also hard to get funding for new things when you're a scientist, or do people want to have...
So we have dug ourselves into a hopeless situation with the funding system, because you have to spend 30% of your time or something, 20% of your time making applications for research grants. You make blue sky ideas. Usually you don't have the time for this, so it's actually happening last moment, just before the deadline. You figure out what you have to do the next 5 years. You put it into paper. You send it off to the evaluation committees, and they make a decision uninformed decision usually because they are not specialists in your area. So they look at does that fit into the global warming thing? Is that this right political thing, and so on. And then you get your grant. And I don't think the research that's carried out then is then optimal from a perspective of making groundbreaking new discoveries. Those are made by observations that contradict what you already know. And that's also why you need this rebellion thing, because it has to be new. It has to be something that disrupts the knowledge we already have and bring us forward in a way that we had not anticipated. And this is going to happen also with our energy, with our food, and so on. New ways of making food in the ocean or whatever it is that we come up with. So disruptive discoveries.
But that seems like it also means that we have to be prepared to invest both your own time and, if you're a funder, your money into things that might not, of course, succeed. So
but
mistakes.
You shouldn't have any control as a funder. Shouldn't have any control whatsoever with what is going to come out of it. What you should do instead is look at the individual research groups, individual researchers, and say, is this worthwhile funding? Did anything come out of what they already did? And if it was important, if it was impactful what they did for the last 3-4 years, maybe it would also be impactful for the next 3-4 years. It would be much, much better system for funding research, in my opinion.
And in your lab, when you have your group of scientists working, how do you make sure that, or do you make sure that people are allowed to make mistakes or follow dead ends?
Absolutely. I would not have the time to do the detailed manipulation in the lab. So they come to me when they have a problem.
Yeah. And but are mistakes always problems, or can they be? I mean,
no, but all research, all challenging research projects fail. So they start by failing. That's more of a rule than something that happens. And then they come and they ask, and you start discussing with them, arguing, and they have to find the solution together with you as a PI. And then that is a very, very rewarding process when you then start thinking about these new challenges that you have. The ideal situation is that when you can stimulate your co-workers so much that they are at least using an hour before they fall asleep thinking about how to solve tomorrow's problem. Right? So if you can do that, and I think that's the same with the kids that you are teaching, if you can make them think by themselves about the problem, not because you are trying to motivate them, because they are motivating themselves, that's really, really powerful.
You spend an hour thinking about your
yes,
problem.
I do.
So you're
and
motivated.
about also about the students' problems.
Oh, right, okay. Give a warm hand to you, Morten.
Thank you.
I'm joined on stage, as you can see, by our next guest. Give a welcome to Alexander Norén. Thank you. And one perspective we haven't touched upon yet this day is the AI perspective, artificial intelligence. Alexander, a year or so ago, you met with the Google CEO, Mr. Sundar Pichai, and he told you that AI is the most profound invention in the history of humanity. Larger than electricity, fire, the wheel, and so on. How should we understand this? Is it?
Well, it's yet to be seen, I would say, because the fire and electricity was quite transformational for society. But well, he has a billion reasons to say that, because he's in the forefront of reaping the benefits if it actually gets there.
He has a vested interest.
But I have no reason to doubt that it's going to be in the same ballpark.
Wow. So we're not talking about an AI bubble this time.
Well, you could definitely have an AI bubble financially. I'm pretty certain that we have one. The trick is to know when it pops. But that doesn't mean that the underlying technology and the transformational potential of it has is a bubble. No. Just as the internet is an integral part of our lives, our daily lives, and how we work today, but it was a financial bubble on the stock market 25 years ago. So I think we'll have pretty much the same thing.
If we go back to the 1990s, you remember Deep Blue? You remember the computer that beat Garry Kasparov, the chess champion of that time? Same talk in the media, same talk in the world. You know, this will transform society as we know it. The computers are here, but that didn't happen.
No, but we've had different stages in the development of AI. We've had AI winters, where development kind of leveled off, and then just a couple of years ago we had this latest and perhaps the most mind-blowing surge again when not surge, I would say leap forward with generative AI, because that's when AI came to our daily lives, when we through applications kind of got to interact with it in such a way that it felt intuitive almost. Before it was just something for really smart people in labs to deal with. Now AI entered our homes.
And you're not talking about chatbots. That's
well, that was the first, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. ChatGPT was kind of. Now we talk about. Yeah. It's a ChatGPT moment, as if to describe how transformational that application was, because that's when we kind of started interacting with AI for the first time in a way that was not technical.
Okay. So I don't really use AI. I tried using AI to come up with questions for this interview. Did a half good job, I would say. I should be using AI more.
Well, I use it as a colleague within quotations marks, so that if I don't have another human being to talk to, and get advice from, then I use that instead. And for instance, say, okay, this is what I've written. It's about this. The context is this. Please give me some feedback. The target group is this, and then it gives me some feedback, and then maybe I want to be even harsher, and say, okay, hit me harder, and then I get even more, and then okay, then starts a conversation almost. How could I do this differently? And then I go back. Okay, then I rewrite it like this, or then I change focus.
I feel like ChatGPT is giving me way too much. It's too pleasant. It gives me too much praise. Like that's a really good idea. It tells me, but then I become. I want it to be a bit more. I can just ask it to be more. Change that.
Yeah, you can use another another provider. There's actually a fun commercial by Anthropic, which has the competitor Claude, that makes fun of ChatGPT's attitude of always saying that you have such great smart questions.
Yeah, that's what I experienced too. So let's talk about health, and I know you are not a health reporter per se, but you've looked into these questions as well. You did a TV series, you've done a couple, but one called Generation AI, where you looked at AI and health in particular. What has AI done already? Can you give us one example of something that has changed?
Well, you have the Nobel awards Nobel Prize going to things that such as DeepMind's AlphaFold, which is using AI to chart protein structure in a so much faster way that it's practically impossible to imagine how it could be done with humans. We would have to add a lot of 100,000s of years, I guess. So that's one thing. But the most concrete now, I would say, is drug discovery, where you have pharma companies investing heavily in AI in order to speed up the drug discovery, because then you can use AI to simulate biological reactions. And hence, if you have a catalog of, well, first of all, you can, thanks to AlphaFold, you have the protein structures, and then you have previous tests of drugs. And that is a data set that you can use to synthetically see what happens if we take this protein and to interact with this enzyme or whatever. And then it can suggest, well, why don't you have a look at these 100 proteins? Okay, yeah, good, and then do the test. So you don't have to do it in the lab, or even test it on animals or whatever. You just do it synthetically, and then you're more ready to go when you want to test it the traditional way. And I saw a study saying that using this way of discovering molecules that could work in a drug increased the probability that it would pass the first trial from normally 45 to 60% up to 80-90%. And even if it doesn't increase in the second and the third trials, just that would mean that it would kind of double the probability that it takes itself through the whole pipeline successfully. And then that means that roughly the cost halves, or the time speeds up.
Time saving
so
and money saving.
You could probably, the hope is that you could afford to develop drugs for so many more diseases than is commercially viable today, and faster.
But so now I guess we're moving into the future a bit too. Or is this something? I mean, it's happening right now, but
that is happening right now. I mean, all pharma companies are heavily investing in this. For instance, Eli Lilly, the most valuable in the world, has gone into strategic partnership with NVIDIA, the AI giant of the world, to develop the greatest AI health supercomputer.
Yeah. But so this morning we heard several fairly ominous, alarming reports from around the world. We talked about infectious diseases, antibiotic resistance. Will AI be what did the experts say? Will AI be a game changer here? Is this something that we should rely on?
Well, to the extent that it could reduce the cost of developing new drugs. Okay. I think that could be a boon for a lot of people who are maybe suffering from diseases that are not so common, that it's today not commercially viable to develop those drugs for those diseases. That's one thing that I can come to think of.
Okay. Another area you looked at in the TV series I mentioned was the education area, right?
Oh, very interesting area.
I'm curious, raise your hand. How many in here use AI in their teaching on a daily or weekly basis? Oh, most of them. Are there those who don't use AI? Have you heard the saying, you won't lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to someone using AI?
Yeah, you will probably be...
Does that go for teachers as well?
No. I saw recently that the British government said to the British tech industry, we are going to endorse and encourage you to develop AI tutors. And we will make sure that the best ones are introduced into the school system, because they see it as a political agenda. Today, if you're not an A student in class and you can just sit through class and you'll have good grades. I mean, that's like the 5% who can be part of that group. Everybody needs some extra help. And if you have parents who have time, well, good for you. If you have parents who have money, don't have time, they can rent someone to be your tutor and help you with your homework and or go through everything. But if you don't, your parents are working, or you have a single mom or dad, and there's no money to buy a tutor, then I think with a really good AI tutor, you could come up to the same level as if you had a human being by your side. So that is a great potential for pupils. Then we haven't even talked about how it could help teachers.
Okay.
And I would say that foremost, it would probably help teachers to unload them from tedious tasks that are not focused on helping the individuals in the classroom.
Right.
So in the best of worlds, it would free up time to be more with pupils. It might be. I mean, I'm not sure we're there yet, because as I've understood it, now we're just trying here and there. There's no concerted effort to help everybody. So it's you're probably doing different things.
So it could work as an equalizer. You mentioned Britain, but here in Sweden, the trend right now is there's this saying that the politicians have been repeating. I'm going to try to translate it, but från skärm till pärm, from screen to folder, moving away from screens, going back to paper and pencil. Are the lawmakers, policymakers, are they
well, that's probably a huge mistake to have that attitude, because that's just because you perhaps didn't do it right the first time, or you were too laissez-faire with, okay, here's an iPad, sort it out, kid. If that was the problem that the government is pointing to, well, why should we do another mistake now by saying, let's keep away from digital stuff, because that can ruin your mind? It can, if you misuse it. So you should be digitally native. Otherwise, you're throwing your kids out to a society where they'll be losers, because the society is getting even more and more digitized and AI native now. So you should be using it, but you should using it with guardrails. You should be using it with common sense.
What does that mean then? Can you give it specifically?
I'm sure you're all doing that, saying that okay, you can't trust this AI just like that. You have to be critical. You have to be saying, okay, well, what's your sources for that? And please give me the link to the report that you're talking about. And then summarize that. And then do that with this tool, not with that tool, because that tool will make it gibberish. So just to learn how, it's like driving. It's like saying, okay, it's dangerous to be on the roads. You can get killed. Yeah, you can. But it can get you from A to B very much faster than walking through half of Sweden. So go to driving school and know how to use a car. So that's what I think we should be doing, sending ourselves to driving school instead of being afraid of driving.
Okay. So this Monday, for the Swedish people in here, you heard there were reports on the news about one of the big Swedish banks, Nordea. They were 1,500 people were had to leave their jobs in Nordea, not because they're doing bad results. The contrary, they're doing really great results. The quarterly reports are better than ever, but they're preparing for a future where AI will change the labor market, and sort of preparing. What about teachers? So you're saying it's a complementary tool, but should we expect a transformation of the teacher?
I'm sure that a lot of companies who are sacking people now are using AI as an excuse, because it sounds so much better. It sounds like you're forward-leaning, that you're investing in the future instead of, we over-invested in certain areas 5 years ago, and we're ashamed to say that we did a mistake. That's one thing to bear in mind. But sure, there will be a lot of jobs that I would say probably most jobs will be transformed and affected by AI. But that doesn't mean that they will disappear. No. You will probably, maybe 40% of what you do today you won't have to do. You'll have this tool to do it. And maybe an AI agent will do it for you, and you'll just check that it's doing its job. But that frees up time to do other stuff that you probably couldn't prioritize today. And if that changes your role and you have a new job description, okay. So what? As long as you're doing some great value added at work and you're happy, maybe you have transformed into another job. And as for teachers, I'm sure that most teachers want to have a one-to-one interaction with their pupils and want to make sure that the groups of pupils are achieving their goals. And I'm 100% sure that we need humans for this interaction and presence in the classroom. So we won't be needing less humans in the education process. Maybe we will be needing less certain types of teachers with certain titles, and then but not less humans in that process of making people, kids, learning how to have a great life and get some things in the head so that they are ready for society.
Okay. Well, that's a comfortable thought for teachers at least. Hopefully, we'll get to keep our jobs for a bit longer.
Well, I'm not just saying it because here are 300 teachers.
No.
I'm saying it because I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's a sector where you need more and more people. Healthcare system as well. And so I mean, there are other jobs that are more at risk, I would say.
Thank you, Alexander, Norén, everybody.
I think the health issue I see the most in my community is mental health problems, such as depression, anxiety, and eating disorders.
Many teenagers experience stress because of school exams, social pressure, and uncertainty about the future. Social media also increases anxiety and lower self-esteem.
One key problem I notice is that people are always on their phones. Too much time on social media weakness communication, increases stress and makes people feel insecure.
A lot of teenagers stay up very late watching TikToks or texting, then wake up tired, unfocused. It doesn't feel serious at first, but over time it really affects mood, skin, energy, and even school performance.
Humans are social animals, like Aristotle said, so many people have to live with connections and live offline connections, but these days people are using their phones and using their laptops to just chat with their friends online, and they don't like to meet friends offline, so like that kind of disconnects people and they kind of cannot give energy to people. So I guess the whole role is to focus on giving energy by reconnecting people.
Unfortunately, not everyone feels comfortable talking about their problems or asking for professional help. I believe we need more open conversation about mental health in schools and better access to psychological support for young people.
Great reflections from some students and a great guest here next to me. A warm hand to Anders Hansen. Anders Hansen, you are a psychiatrist. You are in Sweden also very well known for making science accessible in TV programs, podcasts, and of course as a writer of several books. Would it be fair as a description to say that you are in all this trying to unfold the many reasons why we are behaving like we are behaving?
Yes, I think that's a good description. I've always been endlessly curious about human nature. And as a doctor, I became focused on the biological part of that and realized that we are animals. And we are driven by biological forces that we don't always recognize. And I find that endlessly fascinating. And I think that knowledge is so powerful and can be so freeing in a way. And I think that has been the goal of these books, to present this knowledge to everyone.
What did you think of when you saw these students? We walked during them speaking, so but
right.
What you could...
Well, I think it's very sad to see, of course, and I think that we've seen all over the world, not all over the world, but in many countries, mental health among teenagers has deteriorated. Self-reported mental health has gone down, sleeping problems has gone up. Anxiety and depressive symptoms have gone up. One must be a bit cautious while interpreting that, because it's very, very difficult to measure these things over time since they are self-reported. The question, do you often feel bad? That could be one thing today and it could be another thing in the 1970s. So, but having said that, there are some signs that the mental health has gone down among young people. Self-harm is increasing. Hospital admissions for self-harm is increasing in many countries. And that is sad. In Sweden, the economy has doubled since the 90s. We have become twice as rich, but we are not twice as happy. We seem to be less happy even. And then we must ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? And if someone thinks that, what does economy have to do with that? Well, then you might ask just any hardcore capitalists, why should we have economic progress? And they will say, so that we should have it better, of course. Well, if you naively ask, why should we have it better? Well, so that we should feel better, of course. And we obviously don't do that.
No. Asking you, how many of you teachers have had a student that have had mental illnesses in the way that it has affected schoolwork? Yeah, that's almost everyone. You're not surprised?
No.
The World Health Organization states that over 1 billion persons suffers from mental illnesses. It is an increasing, as you say, globally, primarily among women and young people. And suicide is a leading cause of death among young people in all countries and socio-economic contexts. So if capitalism then haven't solved it, why is this going the wrong direction? I know it's a vast question.
Yeah, I'm not a politician. I'm not trying to argue for any political system. But what I never learned in med school is the fact that half of all humans died before they became adults during almost our entire history. And since you and I and everyone here is the descendants of are the descendants of an unbroken line of survivors. And what did people have to survive to become our ancestors? Well, the most common causes of death were starvation, infections, bleeding, murder, and accidents. And that means that we, as the descendants of those, have in us defense mechanisms against the things that killed us in the past: starvation, dehydration, accidents, infections, and murder. And that means basically that we humans are driven by instincts. And those instincts helped us survive in a world where there was lots of danger and little resources. But those instincts don't make us happy in a world of overabundance. The brain's main goal is not to make us happy, it's to survive. And the brain has not changed during the last 10,000 years in any major way. So we are still driven by this survival machine in our head, and these instincts are being played out against us by completely new things for which evolution has never had chance to calibrate us against. And I think that sums up so much of the mental health problems in today's world. It's actually difficult to think of a world which is more depressiogenic than the world that we live in today, especially for young people.
But this brain of ours, it's very confusing, because so if we are into survival, that's still the mood that we're into. Why are we so obsessed with happiness then?
Well, happiness is a very slippery subject. It can mean so many things. In science, happiness is defined as being content with your long-term, with the direction of your life. And if you agree to that definition, there has been a very good study done at Harvard. It started in the 1930s, and Harvard students were followed, and with a lot of medical tests, interviews, and so on. And when they had children, their children was included, and then their grandchildren, and so on. And now the study has been going for 90 years. And I visited the researcher who is in charge of the study now, Robert Waldinger, and he said that the main result of this big study on human health and human happiness is that what makes humans happy and healthy is relations, relations, and relations. Those are the three things. And if you think about it, it's not surprising, because we humans did not survive by ourselves. To be isolated basically meant that you were going to die. So to be part of the group was as important as having food for our ancestors. And that is the ones who did survive. They had this craving for social contact. And we are the offspring of those people. And those social needs probably had a purely physical dimension to them. People met face to face, because it's not just what we see, it's how we smell, it's how we touch, it's body language, all of it. Everything goes into the brain, and if it doesn't get these signals, it interprets that as being by yourself, isolated. And that meant death for our ancestors. And today, when we have replaced meeting in real life with screens, 6 to 7 hours for teenagers every day, well, we don't get those signals. And then we feel lonely. And feeling of loneliness has increased among young people, especially sort of emotional loneliness where you don't feel that you have anyone to confide to. That has increased, unfortunately.
You've said that it's actually not that strange that we have anxiety. It's stranger that we don't have it.
Right. We never evolved to be happy. We evolved to survive, and the world in which we evolved was very dangerous. So to see danger one time to many was never a problem, but to see danger one time to few was a problem. And an evolutionary biologist has explained this in the following way. There's a rustle in the wind. Our ancestors walking on the savannah, there's a rustle in the wind and in the leaves, and they could think, well, that's probably just the wind. Or they could think, holy cow, that's a lion, and then they flee in panic. Now let's assume that it's just the wind and they flee in panic. How much do they lose from that? Well, they lose about 200 calories. That's what your body uses when it runs away in panic. Now, if you would say that's probably just the wind, when it is a lion, how much do you lose from that? Well, then you lose 200,000 calories. That's what a lion will get when he eats you. You lose your life. So from a purely calorie perspective, you should not be surprised that your alarms of vigilance should be calibrated in a way that it accepts 1,000 false alarms, not to miss the one time your life depended on it. And of course, you may smile at such an example, but it really gives an understanding of what the consequences were that our detection for danger was calibrated in a very dangerous world. So I always tell my patients with anxiety that it's not surprising that there are people who have anxiety. What is surprising is that there are people who don't have anxiety, and maybe they should be diagnosed. And when I say that to my patients, some of them say, now I get it. I am not damaged. I'm not broken goods. My anxiety is one of these 1,000 false alarms that shows that I am functioning normally. And that can be therapeutic in itself. And I always tell them that heavy arms or strong arms can lift heavy things, and strong legs can run fast. But a strong brain is not the brain that goes through periods of stress and anxiety without being affected by it. It's a brain that wants to keep you alive at all costs. So just changing the perspective on that can by itself be therapeutic, I think.
Thank you. One student at the films, she said that everyone is just staring at the phones, and you mentioned loneliness and the danger within that feeling that you are being excluded from a village, from a society. And that's a bit of an irony because the phone is a social tool. So is there a correlation between our use of phones, and I mean the scrolling, social media, and anxiety?
Yeah, that's a big question. What we do know, at least, is that the phone erodes protective factors. What are the protective factors for your mental health? Well, that's meeting in real life, that is sleep, and that is exercise. And we do less of all these things. And that's not so surprising when you spend 6 to 7 hours on it every day. But the question is, of course, why do you still do that? Why is it so hard to pick it up if it has negative consequences? And I think you can understand that from an evolutionary perspective as well. We evolved in a world where there was very little calories. So we should have the urge to eat every calorie that we could find. That made sense. Now, today, that doesn't make a lot of sense at McDonald's. When you take that crave for calories into a world where we have calories everywhere, we will overeat and get type 2 diabetes. It's actually difficult for the brain not to eat when there's food around, because our ancestors should eat. And the same thing goes for our digital devices. You could never get enough information about your surroundings. So we have this constant, we want more information, especially social information, and that is presented in our devices in a way by tech companies that makes it very, very difficult for us to look away from it. And when you log into Facebook or Meta or Instagram, there's an AI that costs billions of dollars that is directing his attention or her attention to you and saying, how should I make her not log out? Because every second that you spend on the device is money for them. So the fact that we have this instinct to get more information, and then that instinct is being exploited by incredibly powerful tech, well, that leads to us spending 6-7 hours a day on the screen, not because we like it, but because we have been hacked, so to speak. I think it's fair to say that. And then we need to take a step back and realize, this doesn't have good consequences in the end. We need to do something about it. And I think when it comes to children and teenagers, we need to have some sort of regulation. It's actually absurd that we have regulation for cars and buildings and everything because they are infrastructure in society. But when it comes to social media, which is also infrastructure in society, we don't have any regulation. For some reason, we have bought into the tech industry's narrative that we are rational and make good choices about this. And obviously we don't. So.
But isn't it also some truth in it that the social media also creates subcultural villages, if you so want, to people who needs that?
Absolutely. No, you're right. There are groups for which social media is incredibly important. They could find their peers and so on and so forth. So it's not just bad. There are some very good things about it. But this addictive part of it has been amplified too much, I think. And there was actually a study that The Guardian reported, and in that study, almost half of all teenagers in the UK wish that they lived in a world without internet. Now, you could say, well, why don't you log out? Well, that's not possible. That's like living by yourself in a cave. So it's obvious that there has been is a downside to this technology, which can, of course, be so wonderful at the same time.
One downside with it was mentioned by the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa, and I know several of you were here some years ago, a Nobel Prize Teacher Summit where she spoke about social media. Now she's a journalist and she has endured enormous amount of hate and threats on social media. And she says that lies spreads faster than truth, and especially when it's laced with hate.
Yes, and remember, the product of social media is not a platform that lets us distribute pictures. It's our attention. It's every second that we spend on it is money, because that can be spent on showing us advertisements. Now, what's the easiest way to get human attention? Well, that's showing us things that makes us angry or afraid, because those were the things our ancestors could not look away from. They could not look away from the lion. They had to look at that. So the best way to get their attention is to push the angry button or the hate button or the afraid button in the brain. And no one programmed these algorithms to do that. One programmed them to grab as much of our attention as possible. And the algorithm decided, the best way to drive human attention is to show them things that they can't look away from, which is the things that makes them angry or afraid. And then we get to see that. And of course, that has contributed to the increased polarization, which we have seen all over the world.
Yeah.
So it's a survival instinct that helped us in the past that is being played out against us with consequences that we had not foreseen.
You quote Mark Twain in one of your books. He says, "I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened."
Yeah, and I think that's such a great way of telling that, the 1,000 false alarms that shows that you are functioning normally. We see the world as so much more dangerous than it actually is. And that is not because we are broken, that's because we're functioning normally. And that it may sound trivial, but if you think about it, most things that people worry or suffer about, that will never occur. It's in vain. Not because we're broken, but because we're functioning the way we should.
What misconceptions would you say that you meet the most when it comes to mental illness?
Wow, that's a big question. I have always thought as a psychiatrist that am I part of a profession that makes 1 in 8 adults, because 1 in 8 adults in Sweden are on antidepressant medication, am I causing 1 in 8 adults to see themselves as sick? And then I really I thought about that a lot the more I read about evolutionary biology, the more I realized that these are defense mechanisms. Then doesn't mean that we're sick. And I think that reframing is so important, especially when you're young. If you're suffering from anxiety and you think that I am broken, I'm damaged, there's something wrong with me. So that's the biggest misconception, I would say.
So also thinking about the amount of hands that were raised and within the education system, there's a lot being done. From your perspective, what can else be done?
Well, that's a difficult question. We need to teach children about mental health. We need to make them aware of what is anxiety, why do people commit suicide. However, you must also understand that you never evolved to be happy. So you can't just medicalize human feelings. You can't say that every instance of fear or anxiety should be diagnosed or treated. And that's a balance to be struck there among them, which is actually rather hard, because it's good that people speak about these things, but at the same time, you risk medicalizing perfectly normal feelings.
Yeah. And again, knowledge is helpful in itself, as you said earlier, with understanding how we function. Thank you so much, Anders Hansen, for coming here and sharing your knowledge. Thank you.
My name's Natalie Groom. I work with the Swedish Red Cross as a country representative for Sudan. And I'm based in Port Sudan, which is in the northeastern area of Sudan. The situation is currently one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. In absolute numbers, there's nothing like it anywhere else. So since the start of the conflict in Sudan in 2023, at some point there were more than 12 million people displaced within Sudan. Health facilities in many of the conflict-affected areas are no longer working. There's a lack of medicines. There are more than 16 million people out of a population of around 45 to 48 million that are going hungry every day. They are in acute hunger. There are around 17 million school-aged children in Sudan, and 13 million of them are out of school. Even when they reach school, they find that the classrooms are really overcrowded. There's a lack of desks and chairs, so you often find children sitting on the floor or squeezed onto school benches. So the teachers also are overworked. Many of them are not being paid, or they're only being paid 50% of their salary, which was already very small. Gosh, the changes I'm hoping to see in the perfect world would be some kind of peace agreement here, so that people can live safely and securely, in their communities. But unfortunately, I don't think that is yet on the horizon.
I am Nancy Lavallie, a community health officer, working with Médecins Sans Frontières Doctors Without Borders in Kenema District, Eastern Province, Sierra Leone. We work together with the Ministry of Health to provide free quality health care for pregnant women, lactating mothers, and children under 5 years of age. We also had the MSF Academy for training of healthcare workers to improve the skill of healthcare workers. For people out there, it is very difficult to access timely health care. There are terrible road access to health facilities. Some facilities are really far. Some people cannot afford transportation fare to move from their communities to health facilities. Outside the hospital, we conduct outreach programs. In our mobile clinics, we do malaria testing and treatment, essential vaccination of childhood. We do family planning, and we do antenatal and postnatal care for people in the communities.
My name is Nour Hammad, and I'm a Palestinian based in Gaza, and I work for the World Food Programme as a communications officer. For nearly 2.5 years, Gaza has endured relentless war and heavy bombing. People have been killed, families torn apart, and entire communities forced into repeated internal displacement. So the most important work that my team are doing on the ground at the moment is responding to the urgent needs, especially food needs. Malnutrition, even if treated, could unfortunately have future impacts on the child's mental health, the child's physical health, their ability to learn, and their ability to go back to the classroom. If that's the long-term impact, then we're also talking about loss of potential for a whole generation that has been exposed to this severe malnourishment. Around 4 months ago, a ceasefire was announced for Gaza, but it's repeatedly disrupted by bombing, by military action. I think there is cautious hope because we don't know what the future will look like yet for the Gaza Strip. We know that agencies are doing their best. We know that humanitarian workers are doing their best, but you can't remain dependent on humanitarian agencies for years. There are stories behind these numbers, and not just any stories. Stories of people who have potential, stories of people who really wanted to lead life in a better way, in a more dignified way, basically.
Welcome our next guest, Johan von Schreb. Johan von Schreb, very welcome here. You are a surgeon. You are a professor of global disaster medicine at Karolinska Institutet here in Stockholm, where you also lead the Center for Health Crisis. You were one of the founders of the Swedish branch of Doctors Without Borders, and you have worked in several war zones and disaster-affected settings throughout your life. We're very happy that you are here. Watching these films, what are your immediate feelings or reactions?
I think the difference or that the tension between hope and despair somehow, between the children playing and the fact that like Gaza is totally destroyed, that you see poverty, children dying. I mean, it's the whole scale of humanity in front of us, and how to relate to that is always extremely difficult. You know, should we give up or should we continue striving? And you know, how should we relate to it? And the fact that we are upset, that I am upset when I see these images, I think is also a sign of that we are humans. But how to manage and how to deal with the upsetness and being that things are not going in the way that we think they should, morally, but also in terms of poverty and war, is something we need to deal with and something we need to talk about. And I think particularly for you as teachers, how to help the children navigate in a world that, you know, as of today looks worse than ever, but in a historical perspective probably is not worse than ever. But nevertheless, that's where we are today. So that was the big answer to your question. That I probably get upset just like you do, but I also see hope in these people that are out there and trying to do something, and that's what I have spent my professional life with, you know, trying to do my part of, but then also understanding that, you know, one surgeon cannot, you know, save all the problems, or as we say, doctors cannot stop a genocide. When I worked in in Rwanda just after the genocide, and all this, you know, what type of responsibilities can you assume and expect the effects? I think for teachers it's fantastic because you have 20 or 30 students, so you can actually multiply yourself by engaging them, by talking to them, and also giving them some hope, interpreting what is happening. And I think in that sense, that's a bit where I come from. You know, as a surgeon, you operate one patient at a time, and you need 5 people in the operation theater that assist to make it happen. So one person gets the attention of 5. But if you work more with public health and with vaccinations, then, you know, one person can actually do something for 10, 20 people. But it's not happening here and now. As surgery might be life-saving here and now. But you also are a bit like a vaccination towards for the children, for hope, etc. So I think teachers are extremely important, and you know, I'm very happy to speak to you here today.
We had earlier this day, we had the Nobel Prize Laureate in Chemistry, Morten Meldal, here, and he said that it takes a rebel to be a good scientist. And then I thought about you having said that Doctors Without Borders is, to some extension, it's revolutionary. That ingredients is within the organization. What do you mean by that?
So, I mean, non-governmental organizations, by their name, they are not governmental, so they are something else. They are, in Sweden we have this old tradition of people's movement, folkrörelsen, where we get together and decide on something we want to work together for. It could be anything. And that's, you know, we for MSF it was young doctors and those really wanted to change the world, and not taking no for an answer. Instead of, you know, expecting carpets to be rolled out, we kicked in the doors and said, we are here, we need to do something about the situation. We will not accept governments telling us, no, you're not allowed to come here, if we see somebody in need. So you could say that the mandate that MSF works under is not a governmental mandate, but it's the people, the population in need. And this gives you a right to decide yourself. But in order to do that, you have to have a moral. You also have to have, you know, a very humble relationship to the population you're trying to help. And being a doctor, I mean, in the doctor-patient relationship, it is sort of this. Being a doctor, you have to overcome the distance between you and your patient. I have the knowledge, I have the skills, and I am well, and my patient doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the skills, and is also sick. And if you come to work in Sierra Leone or in Sudan, on top of that you will have a patient that might be illiterate, is poor. So in one way, when I've been working in these settings, the distance between me and my patient, you can never become further away in the world because it's totally different world. But thanks to this sort of patient or doctor moral and patient-doctor relationship, you can overcome that, and you know it's a power relationship, but you need to be very sure not to use that power to oppress the patients you're trying to help, but really listening to them, because if you want to help them become well, you also have to give them the power to do so, and you are not in a position to tell them how they should live their life, but you can give them advice. And I think by being a non-governmental, we can take the freedom, and I think that's where the rebel comes in, that you know, we take the right to not to do SIDA policies, for example, not to follow SIDA policies, but the policies we decide ourselves because we think it's better for the patient. So, for example, MSF is not taking any money from the Swedish government because they don't want to be directed by politics. They want to be directed by the needs and by the morals of the organization towards the population in danger.
Could you walk us through if we get very practical now, so what happens? You get a notification, something is going on in the world. It can be a conflict, or it can be a disaster of any kind. What do you do?
Well, so last week I had a telephone call to go to Beirut, and we will see what happens from that. But so 2 years ago I was or 1.5 years I was there following the Israeli bombardment and invasion of southern Lebanon. But of course, I as a person cannot do a whole lot of things. But what I know is I have the experience to understand what it takes. I mean, I could be a clinician, meaning doing surgery, but at this stage, I try to use my experience much more in organization and also understanding what the needs will be and set up services where they may be needed, trying to understand what are the actual health needs in this particular population. And I think very often as a surgeon, you can tend to focus on the injured. However, we know that the majority of people's illness relate to normal conditions, malnutrition that we saw here, malaria, other types of conditions. So we cannot, only focus on that. It has to be primary health care. It has to be public health, water and sanitation. In Gaza, for example, people don't have access to safe water and latrines. And that is more of a problem, actually, than the bleeding and the broken bones. But you need to manage both of them, but you need to see the whole structure. And then, of course, when you arrive from outside, you have to work with the national health system and those that will stay and will be there. So you cannot come in and try to be a hero and take over and say, here we come as cowboys and fix up. No, but you have to, work very closely with them and could be at sometimes you just top up salaries of some of the healthcare workers because as we heard in this movie, one hadn't received salary for a long time. So that might be a better option than to set up a surgical tent and start. So first of all, it's about understanding the situation and then see how can we pool resources into this country. Because sometimes the country in itself might have the resources. And I was in Lebanon 2020 when the big explosion happened in the harbor and there were 5,000 injured and there were 200 dead and it was a desperate situation and it was live and then all internationals wanted to send field hospitals and they started deploying and it took 3-4 days, but nobody really understood that in Lebanon they have a lot of capacities and these people helped out transporting the injured to hospitals. There are 50 hospitals within 1 hour from where the bomb blast was, and they moved out the emergency room to the parking lots and all the staff came in. And that's what you see in emergency situations, that during the first 24 hours you have more staff than you need because everybody comes in and want to work and everybody is a volunteer. So they managed very quickly and within 12 hours they had managed all those casualties and they had gone home. And then after 2 days the field hospitals started arriving and there was nothing left for them to do because nobody had really thought of the capacity that was available. And probably a better thing would be to sort of help them stock up all the equipments that was used and maybe provide help repair the hospitals that were destroyed. But we tend to think of it very much I have to rush in like a cowboy and fix the problem. But for injured people, you will always arrive too late if you're not there on the spot when things happen.
So it's a necessity with flexibility.
Extremely so, and also open mind in terms of myths. I think we're guided very much by myths. We have to send medicines, we have to send field hospital surgeons. Well, maybe good, but maybe it's better with a water and sanitation technician. Or sometimes, when I speak to surgeons and that would like to go and work in these settings, I say it could be better that you dig latrines because that's maybe where the problem is. And of course, surgeons get very upset about that because they have clean.
Kind of a different work.
But then if I'm a surgeon, at least I can say it. But if you're a nurse, the surgeons wouldn't listen. So at least I wouldn't go into a fist fight with them. But sometimes they're very upset.
You have a long experience. If you compare how humanitarian aid worked when you started out till today? What have changed?
Oh, so much. I think good intentions were the main driving force at that time. Anybody could go, and I remember I worked in Haiti earthquake. That's now 16 years ago, and it was totally chaos. Everybody arrived. It was very close to the United States, and they were, we had set up a field hospital with MSF, and there it was actually needed because there was nothing else. The whole health system had been destroyed. Low-income country. Lack of hospital before, so there were a lot of, even when you arrived after 4 or 5 days, there were people with femur fractures lying around on the street. So actually there was nowhere for them to go. So then by your analysis of the situation could tell you here actually it is needed with external field hospital. But everybody was running around and nobody was doing any coordination. There were non-doctors doing surgical procedures and good intentions. And following that, we decided we cannot continue like this, the professional community. So together with the World Health Organization, we started to say, okay, we need to professionalize ourselves. So we started a global 112 number, you can say, for field hospitals that could be coordinated, that had quality standard, and then actually that there had to be qualified people, which was not when I started. It was good intentions, you could do what you liked and anything would be good. But today you cannot enter into another country without having a license to practice and showing that you're a surgeon. But when I started, it was, anybody could go, and especially if you're, a white man coming from Europe pretending you're a surgeon, nobody would question that. But I think it's gone from good intentions to quality much more. It's a bit of a slow process because some people are still left behind with these good intentions, that it's better to send medicines than to think about what to send. But I can see the progress and things are at least improving. But of course, there's never enough, and the time perspective, you can't just fly in for a few days or a week and then go out. You have to invest in national capacities, and this coordination mechanism that we made today, it's very much focused on creating national capacities to respond to their own emergencies. And that's happening in Africa in a lot of countries, and we are from Karolinska Institute where I work, we are part of that process, helping these countries to build their capacities. So I think it's going towards a regional, but now a national, strengthening national capacity. Before it was, us, the rich countries sending field hospitals that were not fit for purpose. But now, at least there's some progress on less dependent on these outside actors, which I think is very good, and regional people. Like if you look at Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, they are they work together and they manage. If they have crisis, they manage together. They don't need a team from United States or from Germany or from Sweden. They are doing fine themselves, and that's, I think, a good progress.
It's as the woman in the film from Gaza said, it's a cautious hope in that. Thank you so much. A warm hand to Johan von Schreb.
Globally, I think health education should be a priority. Teaching young people from a young age helps them make healthier choices and prevents many diseases later in life.
I think a lot of my peers face a lot of stress and anxiety from school and extracurriculars.
A lot of my friends say they have experienced concerns in their lives in various ways. Some people think that mental issues are something to be ashamed of, so they tend to hide them. I think being aware about those things are important.
This stress affects our sleep, self-confidence, and focus. Often, mental health is ignored or misunderstood. We need open conversations, supportive schools, and safe spaces where young people can ask for help without fear or judgment.
Mental health is a serious problem as young people are stressed, trying to break out of the poverty cycle but being unable to due to the failures of the state.
On a global level, I believe unequal access to healthcare is the most critical issue. In many regions, people still lack essentials such as clean water, vaccines, and proper medical treatment due to economic conditions or where they live.
Health should be a basic human right, and improving access to basic health care could prevent millions of deaths caused by unavoidable diseases.
Please welcome with a warm hand Dr. Shepard Uranje. You are so very welcome, Shepard Uranje. The collected experience and knowledge here today is astonishing among you all and our guests here on stage, and you are surely adding to it. You are a sustainability education specialist. You have been working internationally. You have engaged with the entire spectrum of education, schools, universities, governments, and multilateral organizations. You have devoted your entire career to this. And you have also been listening to everything today. Yes. I thought that we'll end this summit with some reflections about what you've heard. I'm thinking we'll start with positive surprises. Anything that you thought, okay, good. Okay, you look concerned now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It is so important that when we are in a summit like this, you don't only have to show a brave face, but you actually show that it is possible to win. I wouldn't be here if it was not possible that hope is on the horizon. I wouldn't be here if it was not possible that education is going to help us to come out of the situation in which we are. It is so important that today we have managed to identify those areas which are slowing us down in achieving the 2030 goal of the Global Sustainable Development Goals. But it is important for us to know that of all the presentations that we have seen today, that there is hope. A lot of things are happening, from HIV/AIDS, from situations where we're talking about the gap between rich and poor. And it is interesting to notice that we do have these inequalities in all societies, and that we have made inroads, and that teachers have been isolated, identified as part of the solution to the global problem. Yeah.
You have said that learning must not only inform, it must transform futures. What do you mean by that?
It means gone are the days when knowledge only was important. We are in an era where we need to use our education or the learning that has happened through us, with us, in order to make ourselves a different kind of people. I have always said to the people that I'm working with, the teachers and my fellow teachers at university, etc., that you are the people that we have been waiting for. When we talk about transformation, we mean you are engaged in a learning that will make change happen, that the world will not wait for change to happen to them, but that the world will wait for you and me to make change happen, because change is inevitable. But we must not wait for change to change us. We must change the future. The future is already there, but we can change it. We already know where this future is taking us. And if that is the future that we don't want, we can use education to change that future. And I think teachers have got a very strong role in making that happen.
Well, if you are a teacher then, and you have been listening to this today, and I mean, there's a lot of information, material. Can you use that for this road to transformation?
Yes, one important thing that came through and through in all the presentations that I listened to was the idea that we are in a world where we have got wicked problems. And some of the problems that we have are super wicked problems. Challenges like I have been listening to Stefan saying measles have come back in North America, and that we still have HIV/AIDS, and that we still have malaria has come back to Europe, situations like that. So the situation that we are looking at here is that we have got wicked problems which have become super wicked problems, and education is important because what we have been looking at, two things that I think have contributed to this. The first one is we have been trying to solve wicked problems using simple solutions, and that does not happen. That's the first thing. And then the second thing being that we have been thinking that there are solutions to wicked problems. But there are no real solutions to wicked problems. We have learned to live with COVID. It doesn't mean COVID has disappeared. We still have AIDS, HIV/AIDS amongst us. It hasn't gone. We have learned to live with it. People don't die as much as they did. We have reduced the number of people dying from malaria, but malaria is still there. We have learned to live with it. So it is very important for us to know that when it comes to wicked problems, there are no real solutions, but we can learn. Teaching and learning is important because we can learn how to live with them or to manage them.
But is that also a risk that we learn to live with things that we shouldn't learn to live with?
It is not true that these are things that we shouldn't learn to live with because they are already there. It is not good for us to wish some things away. We know that we have got these challenges amongst us. We know that the world is going in a direction that we don't anticipate. If the world is going in a direction that we don't anticipate, we already know that. So how do we live with that? And education can help us to change that trajectory. We already have a trajectory. We are already going somewhere, but education can turn us around.
According to the WHO, health literacy is a determinant for health. And that is, then the individual's knowledge and know-how about health. And that can be an even stronger predictor of an individual's health status than income or employment status or education level. But this literacy must come from somewhere. And a joint engagement from a societal institution is needed. You have been working a lot with this joint work for gaining something. How can the education system be empowered to strengthen the health literacy, if we become concrete?
Yes, in the very first presentation, we learned that hospitals are there to repair the damage that people have gone through, that they are sick. You go to hospital because the hospital will repair what has been damaged. But real health is in the family. It is in the community. Now, we have got an incredibly important role when it comes to family health, for an example. As teachers, we are having a responsibility to look after, to support, and to nurture students who come from families. And families come from communities. And communities make the society in which we are. If we have got a curriculum and pedagogy that will empower our students to have that knowledge, that will enable them in the first place to be able to prevent what can be prevented, to be able to support what can be supported, to be able to do what they need to do as individuals, as families, then we have a community that is getting healthy. And the education sector is very much important when it comes to that.
So finally, what do you bring from this day, if you would narrow it down?
What we bring from this day is that teachers are innovators. One thing that I could identify today is disruptive innovation. As teachers, we have to disrupt the way we have been doing things. We all know that something must change in our education system. Sometimes we don't always agree what it is, but we agree that we have to disrupt the status quo. By disrupting the status quo, we mean it must not be business as usual. When we leave this place, it must not be business as usual when you go into your next class. It will be business as unusual. And I always talk about a learning-centered environment where the professor and the students, everyone in the room is a learner. Together, we are bringing a situation where learning itself is transferred, the responsibility from the professor to the learners. And that way, I think people can be empowered.
Yeah. That is wonderful last words. Thank you so much, Shepard Oranje. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for spending this entire day with us. Johan von Schreb, he said that he once was approached by a student, a medical student, and she was devastated over the condition of the world, and she cried, and she asked him to say something hopeful. He, who then had seen the worst faces of humanity, said something that is so basic and yet so powerful. He said, "We must just keep on going. Business as unusual, as we just heard, but we must figure out what we are doing and why we are doing it, and then keep on going." And within the Nobel Prize history, this keep on going device is essential, and it can in itself be an act of resistance, of progress, and profound transformation. Not only for the Nobel Prize laureates, but for all of us researchers, scientists, writers, peace advocates, students, and teachers. Thank you all from us for being here, and give yourself a warm hand. And I know you, Isak, have a final request.
I do. For those of you who've been to the summit before, you know perhaps that we have a tradition of ending this in the same manner. We've done it, this is the 8th time we do it the same way, and I know this will be a bit uncomfortable for the Swedes in the room. This doesn't come natural to us, but I'm going to request you all, remember, anxiety is the normal state of being. So everyone, please come forth to the front of the room, to the stage. We're going to crowd the stage, take a group photo with our photographer to end the day. Hope to see you again next year. Thank you for coming.